The most unbelievable true story that history tried to hide. You're gonna swear this was a movie plot. In 1980, Lake Pinier in Louisiana drained like a bathtub with the plug removed. Oil drillers on a rig in the lake had hit a mine shaft below. The rig, barges, a tugboat, and part of a nearby island got sucked into the largest man-made whirlpool ever made. It was a salt mine, and miraculously, nobody died. Operation Mincemeat. The Allies planted a dead body with fake battle plans to trick the Germans into thinking that the Allies were going to attack Sardinia when they were in fact going to attack Sicily. They built an entire life for this dead, fake military man, dumped him in the ocean, and successfully distracted the Germans. It's so detailed and crazy and amazing, and it worked. Edgar Allan Poe wrote a novel in 1838 in which 4 shipwrecked survivors, at the point of starvation, chose to resort to cannibalism. So they killed the young cabin boy, Richard Parker, and ate him. Then, in 1884, a ship called the Mignonette sank. 4 crew members survived. At the point of starvation, they killed and ate the youngest of them, called Richard Parker, the inspiration for the tiger's name in Life of Pi. The death of Ken Rex McElroy. He terrorized Skidmore, Missouri for decades, stalking, attacking, murdering, and committing the unspeakable act against 2 people who he called his wives. He had an expensive attorney, so he was never charged. The law never helped the poor town. One day, the town gathered for a meeting on how to deal with McElroy. Details get a little vague here, but apparently someone alerted the room that guy was in the bar up the street. Quietly and calmly, everyone got up and walked over to the bar. As McElroy got into his truck, somebody just shot him in the back of the head. The town just went back to going about their business. When the witnesses, like the entire town, were questioned, everyone claimed they didn't see a thing. Nobody has ever been arrested. In 1971, a teenage girl named Julianne Kepke was on a plane that was struck by lightning and disintegrated in the air. She plummeted 3,000 meters, strapped to her seat, and landed in the Amazon rainforest. Her mother had been on the flight with her, and Julianne searched in vain for her, but Julianne was in fact the sole survivor of the crash. She survived for 11 whole days alone, treating her maggot-infested wounds with fuel and using tracking techniques her father had taught her, before she found a boat that she used to make her way back to civilization. What an absolute legend. My god, this teen just basically lived out her own version of the novel Hatchet. That wound treatment seems pretty frickin' harrowing all by itself, to be honest. Maybe not as harrowing as having an aeroplane disintegrate around you though, so maybe she was just ready for anything at that point. The Soviet scientists, starving to death, saving the seed bank of Leningrad during the invasion in the winter of 1941-42, despite it being full of corn, wheat, and potatoes. The scientists ran out of food but couldn't eat anything from the seed bank since they needed it to preserve its stocks. That level of dedication is just unimaginable to me. To go against your survival instincts and starve to death in order not to eat the food. I can't even comprehend. Wojtek was a bear who fought the Germans in return for cigarettes and beer. He didn't die until 20 years after World War II. My favorite part about the story is that after the war, he lived in a zoo. It was common for soldiers from the Bears Company to come and visit and simply jump into the enclosure to play with him, much to the zookeeper's annoyance. The CIA was researching psychic abilities for 30 years as a way to spy on the USSR. After 30 years, the program was terminated, and their conclusion was that psychic powers probably don't exist. The actual conclusion was that the evidence for remote viewings was unfalsifiable, and therefore unprovable. Many of the more promising results were believed to be caused by information leakage, meaning that test subjects had prior knowledge about the subjects they were asked about. They were unable to verify any of their results because of this, and even if the psychic abilities were real, they were unreliable at best. Due to a military standoff that took years, 15 ships became stranded in an inland sea, and over 8 years formed a multinational ship-based society that even included its own currency. The battle for Castle IDOWorkHereLady near the end of World War II saw US soldiers, French prisoners of war, and the German army fighting on the same side to hold the castle against an SS tank division. To make it even weirder, the French prisoners included several prime ministers and a tennis star. Somebody get Tarantino on the phone. He needs to work on this. The escape from Antarctica by the members of the Antarctic expedition led by Ernest Shackleton. The stuff they went through was unbelievable. Their boat, the Endurance, was crushed by ice floes. They were stranded on the floes for over a year in temperatures well below freezing. They then took 3 boats, around 22 feet in length, across the Antarctic Ocean looking for land. There were about 10 men in each of these boats. They missed reaching land by just a few miles at times. 2/3 of them got stranded on Elephant Island, surrounded by ice, while one of the boats went out in search of rescue. That boat made it through the Drake Passage, one of the deadliest places in the ocean. All but 3 of them got stranded with little food and water, while the 3 men who left became the first people to cross South Georgia on foot. They found civilization, rescued the men who came through the Drake Passage, waited months until they could rescue those on Elephant Island. Every single person who came on the initial voyage survived, with the worst lasting consequences being a single foot amputation. I am shocked that this has not been made into a major movie or miniseries. There is a fantastic documentary called The Endurance. The trip was partially funded through shooting wildlife footage, so they happened to have cameras. Unbelievable images of their experience. Highly recommend it. Unsinkable Sam, a cat that survived the sinking of 3 different ships during World War II. That cat 100% sank those ships, right? Apparently, death from laughter is an incredibly rare but legit cause of death. In the 3rd century BCE, Chrysippus, a Greek Stoic philosopher, died of laughter after he saw a donkey eating his figs. And Chrysippus is not the only isolated cause. Among a few other cases, there was 5th century BCE Greek painter Zeuxis, who is said to have died laughing at his painting of the goddess Aphrodite, for which an old woman who had commissioned the painting had insisted on modeling. Also, Cleopatra, the ruler of Egypt in the 1st century BCE, claimed that her retainer died laughing at her husband's death. According to the linked Wikipedia article on the subject, the most recent case is that of Ole Bentzen, a Danish audiologist who saw a funny scene in a comedy film and laughed so hard that his heart rate rose to a point where he had a fatal heart attack in 1989. From what I understand from reading up on this topic, it's not the act of laughing itself, but rather a fatal repercussion from a fit of laughter, such as cardiac arrest, asphyxiation, or aneurysm, which causes death. For instance, Ole Bentzen suffered a heart attack as a consequence of the terrible fit of laughter he had had. It's possible that such was the case of Chrysippus and the others as well. I always thought of, "I'm gonna die laughing" as a hyperbole. I myself use it quite liberally. But I guess every hyperbole has a grain of truth to it. Is a donkey eating your figs really that funny? I guess you had to be there. The Bone Wars. 2 rival paleontologists, Othniel Charles Marsh and Edward Drinker Cope, were in a race for academic clout, so they both took off to places like the fossil beds of Montana and Utah to try and dig up as many dinosaurs as possible before the other guy. But they didn't stop there, and hired spies and saboteurs to impede the other's work, as well as trying to pass off sloppy or fake skeletons sometimes. The overwhelming majority of the iconic dinosaur genuses that we know were either first discovered or simply got a lot of new samples to work with, and were made iconic by the amount of publicity these guys received. This includes Triceratops, Stegosaurus, some remains of Tyrannosaurus, Apatosaurus, and many, many more. It is also where Brontosaurus confusion comes from. One of the scientists, I forget which one of these 2 crazy guys, had already discovered Apatosaurus. The other then discovered a new skeleton of the same dinosaur, but intentionally put a skull from a different species, Camarasaurus, onto that skeleton and tried to pass it off as a new species entirely, Brontosaurus. The fake was unveiled pretty quickly, but the name stuck. More recently, however, we have a lot more tools to distinguish smaller features from bones, and it was found that the skeleton that was originally passed off as a Brontosaurus is actually barely different enough to receive its own genus, and the name Brontosaurus was revived. I've always thought that this could make a fantastic show, especially if it includes dramatized flashbacks to how the dinosaurs in the skeletons died. The Wikipedia page's intro describes it very nicely as well. The Bone Wars, also known as the Great Dinosaur Rush, was a period of intense and ruthlessly competitive fossil hunting and discovery during the Gilded Age of American history, marked by a heated rivalry between Edward Drinker Cope of the Academy of Natural Sciences of Philadelphia and Othniel Charles Marsh of the Peabody Museum of Natural History at Yale. Each of the two paleontologists used underhanded methods to try to outdo the other in the field, resorting to bribery, theft, and the destruction of bones. Each scientist also sought to ruin his rival's reputation and cut off his funding, using attacks in scientific publications. It's worth noting that the Bone Wars have had a massive positive legacy on paleontology as a field, but left both scientists financially and socially ruined. An excellent bittersweet ending. I mean, academia with this much rivalry and bad blood can be found literally anywhere there's a university, if you ask me. Luckily, most of the participants these days don't have the resources and free reign that these two guys seemed to have. This example definitely has the most lasting legacy. I wonder if Edward Drinker Cope was called that as a nickname, or if his parents just knew that he'd have that particular issue from birth. At President Andrew Jackson's funeral in 1845, his pet parrot had to be removed because it was swearing so loudly. He also left a giant rotting cheese wheel to his successor, Van Buren. He'd received two as a gift, and he held a giant party in the White House where people could just show up and drink and eat the first 1,200-pound cheese wheel gift. But the other one remained in the cellar for 2 years until Van Buren took over. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? An English king named Ethelred, later called the Unready, took some troops to defend against a Viking invasion. The weather was bad, so a lot of the Vikings' ships crashed as they were landing. Ethelred thought that it would be dishonorable to attack them as they were stumbling onto shore, so he kept his troops back until the Vikings had a better chance to get together and form proper battle lines before he attacked them. The better prepared Vikings then won the fight and slaughtered a bunch of Ethelred's men, and he and the rest were forced to run away while the Vikings went around pillaging the land. There are 3 separate defenestrations of Prague. For those who don't know, defenestration means to throw someone out a window. That same word was coined to describe the third such event. The defenestrated parties survived in this third event. The Catholics claimed angels helped them down. The Protestants claimed they landed on a dung heap. Historians think they survived because they were only on the 2nd floor. To this day, political protests in Prague often involve defenestrating someone in effigy. The defenestrated parties only survived because the checks bounced. Jean de Clisson, of the 14th century, was married to a French nobleman who was beheaded for treason by the French king. Enraged, she sold their estate and purchased 3 black warships with red sails, and became a pirate queen of the English Channel who targeted French ships. She became known as the Lioness of Brittany, and in her 13 years of piracy, she'd slaughter every member of a ship's crew except for one, so that this last survivor could go back and tell the French king what had happened. Why do I feel like the 1300s never get talked about enough? Well, you see, the focus is on the Black Plague. Everything else gets lost by the wayside because that was so massive. Basically, nobody lived to tell the tale, and those that did spoke of nothing but their survival. Joshua Norton was this random crazy guy from San Francisco who hated all of this political nonsense that was going on at the time and figured he could do the job better at it himself. And thus, the Emperor of the United States and Protector of Mexico was born. While he held no real power, the people liked him so much that they treated him like royalty anyways. Any currency issued under his name was treated like real money at many establishments. One day, he was arrested by a private security force because of his mental health, which enraged practically all of San Francisco. The police chief let him go because he had committed no crime, and Norton gave an imperial pardon to the guy who arrested him. After this incident, any police officer Norton passed would salute him. Another time, when a riot had formed and was getting pretty violent, Norton simply stood in front of the mob and calmly prayed, which managed to disperse the mob. And that is not even a fraction of the crazy stuff that guy did. The London beer flood of 1814. A 22-foot-tall beer vat blew out, and at least 100,000 to as much as 323,000 imperial gallons, give or take, flooded slum dwellings, killing 8 people. 5 of those people were killed at the time at a celebration of life service for somebody else. I don't have the time to look for a link, but I remember a story of the big whiskey spill like this, where some of the casualties were from alcohol poisoning, drinking muddy whiskey from the puddles in the road. Oh yes, 1875 in Dublin. The night a river of whiskey ran through the streets of Dublin. In all, 13 people are understood to have died as a result of the fire. None of the deceased perished in the flames, nor did they die of smoke inhalation. Each succumbed to alcohol poisoning from drinking freely of the derelict whiskey. The Salyut 7 Space Station Rescue. On 11th February 1985, contact with Salyut 7 was lost. The station began to drift and all systems shut down. At this time, the station was uninhabited. Janibekov piloted his ship to intercept the forward port of Salyut 7 and matched the station's rotation. After hard docking to the station and confirming the station's electrical system was dead, Janibekov and Savanyik sampled the station atmosphere prior to opening the hatch. Attired only in winter fur-lined clothing, they entered the station to conduct repairs. During World War II, the US military researched the idea of dropping bombs filled with bats with attached incendiary devices over Japan. A dental surgeon, Adams, who was an acquaintance of Eleanor Roosevelt, wrote the idea to her. He explained that bats would nest in the wooden buildings of Tokyo, and then the delayed timers on the incendiary devices would go off simultaneously and cause a massive fire. President Roosevelt approved the idea for study. The military found it would be highly effective compared to traditional firebombing campaigns. The only reason the plan wasn't implemented was because the bat bombs wouldn't have been combat-ready until mid-1945, so they used the atomic bombs instead. Highly recommend reading the article. So many crazy details, the entire thing reads as a surreal satirical article. Sergeant Stubby. During World War I, a soldier found a stray dog when training on the Yale University campus and took a liking to him. The soldier snuck the dog onto the ship when he had to leave campus, and when the dog was found by the commanding officer, he was allowed to stay because he had learned how to salute. Stubby was injured a few times during the war, but he was useful with alerting his squad of surprise mustard gas attacks and gunshots before the human ear could detect the sound. He also found and comforted wounded soldiers, and caught a German soldier by the leg of his pants until American soldiers got to him, aka the bestest boy to ever live. Jack, a baboon who was employed to change rail signals. A contemporary quote reads, "After initial skepticism, the railway decided to officially employ Jack once his competency was verified. The baboon was paid 20 cents a day and a half bottle of beer each week. It's widely reported that in his 9 years of employment with the railroad, Jack never made a mistake. An official investigation was initiated after a concerned member of the public reported that a baboon was observed changing railway signals at Utenhage near Port Elizabeth. Can you frickin' imagine? Yeah, in my mind I'm imagining a drunk man on the train. He looks out the window, sees the baboon, and looks back inside. Then he shakes his head in disbelief and looks outside again. Sure enough, the baboon is still there. He looks at the bottle in his hand and slowly begins to pour it out." Thank you for typing out that wonderful cartoon cliché. I swear it's one of those jokes that will never fail to make me laugh. What an amazing phenomenon to look out and see on your commute. The East German balloon escape. In 1979, 2 families escaped East Germany to West Germany by a homemade hot air balloon. There's a couple of great escapes, like when the border was still new and some geniuses got past by lowering a convertible until it was shorter than the gate's arm and just gunned it through the checkpoint. Louis XIX was King of France for 20 whole minutes. The shortest war ever recorded was around 40 minutes long. During the Salem witch trials, dogs were also accused of witchcraft. 2 dogs were executed because of it. Oh no! Brazil going to assist on a war with boats, panicking when seeing bubbles, and ending up killing one of a rare species of dwarf whale that they thought was a German submarine attacking them. How could they have known it was a whale? This was in the infancy of sonar, and the Brazilian Navy just didn't have that. In 2007, a paraglider got trapped in the updraft of 2 joining thunderstorms and was lifted to an altitude of 33,000 feet. She landed over 3 hours later, about 60 kilometers north of her starting position, having survived extreme cold, lightning, and a lack of oxygen. I mean, that sounds scary. Imagine spending 3 hours in the sky and not being able to get back down. She was unconscious for some of it, thankfully. A Russian Tsar had a bomb thrown at him, avoided it, and thought it was a good idea to stay there to look at the damage. Enter second guy with bomb. During World War I, the German Navy built a ship and painted it to make it look like a British ship called the RMS Carmania in order to infiltrate and destroy British convoys. On the ship's first outing, the first enemy it encountered was the real RMS Carmania, which promptly sunk it. Question: are we sure it was the actual real Carmania that won? I mean, probably, but I do love the implication of a bunch of German soldiers pretending to be British Navy after the war ended. Oh yeah, tally ho. Good thing we beat those Germans, eh, old boy? The Carrington Event. In 1859, the Earth was hit by a geomagnetic storm from the Sun. It caused auroras as far south as Rome. Telegraph wires caught fire, and in general, it was chaos. If this happened today, it would likely cause massive blackouts for weeks, or even months, and cause trillions in damage.
People who have met their online friends, what made you instantly regret it? Met my best friend at the time on League of Legends. After talking every day for 3 years, I ended up moving to a state much closer to him, so we decided to finally meet. We talked about all the things we'd do together and how awesome it would be. I loved him so much. He was there for me through so much and was a wonderful friend. He had a new girlfriend at the time of our meetup and he brought her along with him. I had no problem with this because I'd love to meet the woman who makes him happy. It was abundantly clear from the get-go that she wasn't a real big fan of me. I did my best to be kind and still had tons of fun. I didn't hear from my friend much after that. A mutual good friend of ours messaged me, and when I asked about my best friend, they said his girlfriend was telling people that I was basically an awful person for whatever reason. 3 years later and he's engaged to this woman, and I'm happy for him, but I haven't spoken to him in those 3 years. I still miss him every day, and I wish I could be there for him on his wedding day. Not instant regret, but did make me realize things could have gone badly if this friend hadn't been a good human. There was a guy I used to play Halo 2 with all the time. We were playing Halo one day and I made some off-the-wall comment about how bad traffic was due to them redoing one of our local roads. He said his town was redoing a lot of roads too. I think I had a friend over or coming over and I forgot to mute my mic and said the road he lived on, asking when he had to leave to come over. Anyways, my Xbox buddy was like, "Holy crap, do you live in XYZ?" And I told him, yeah. Turns out he lived like 5 miles away from me on the other side of town. We ended up meeting up and I was about 11 or 12 at the time. He was like 17. And he went and bought me a burger and milkshake and we chatted. Pretty cool dude from what I remember. But when I got home that night, I thought about how different that could have been if he wasn't just some high schooler trying to make a kid's night with a burger and shake. My brother met a girl in person that he'd known for 4 or 5 years online, during which time they kind of had an online relationship. She had brought her friend with her to meet him, and while they were sitting around a table awkwardly making conversation, with my brother apparently quite shocked at how bad she looked in person compared to how she looked online, and having absolutely no interest in her other than his friends, the girl sent her friend a message saying, "Oh my god, get me out of here, he's looking at me like he wants to jump me." But she accidentally sent it to my brother. What ensued was likely incredibly painful to be a part of. My brother showed her his phone and looked at her in disgust. Met a girl I really liked on World of Warcraft, but she lived in another country. After a couple of vacations there, it turned into a relationship. I made the decision to move and start a new life there with her. After living there for 4 months, I slowly realized she was crazy as hell. Huge mood swings paired with a lot of aggression. I ended up getting stabbed in the side by her while asleep. Needless to say, after getting out of the hospital, I took the first plane back home. She's still in a psychiatric hospital. I have a weird story about a lesbian I met online and eventually IRL. For reference, I'm a bi girl. We started talking after I made a comment on a lesbian forum about being a single lesbian mom. I still didn't know if I was bi or lesbian at the time. We started messaging a lot, hundreds of texts a day. This included some sexy messages and pictures too. But she was always obsessed with my daughter, like almost demanding pictures of her and updates on her. Eventually we arranged to meet up. When we finally see each other in person, she looks shocked and asks where my daughter was. I said she was being babysat by my mom so we can have a date. I could tell this threw her off a little bit. After our date, we start hooking up at my place. Even then, she was still asking about her. "After this, can I meet her? Will you let me babysit? Do you think she'll start calling me mommy?" I was like, chill, she's 1.5. This, combined with her being obsessed with my daughter's stuff, including stealing a pacifier, a dirty onesie, and going through the diaper pail, I decided this lady's crazy. She ended up stalking me for a while, but I was moving back in with my mom anyway, so I managed to escape. I was 13 and had a 20-year-old pen pal in Hong Kong, both of us female. We met on Tumblr and emailed each other regularly. My parents were CC'd in all of our correspondence, and we basically just talked about our cultures. About a year of us talking went by, and she said that her university allowed her to study abroad in Europe for a semester, and she chose my country. Fun! I was excited! However, some time went by and our friendship kind of faded, to the point where I had forgotten she was even coming to my country. About 2 weeks before she was supposed to come, she emailed me that her student accommodation had to be cleaned out, so she couldn't access it on the night she arrived. She needed a place to stay for one night. I asked my mom and she agreed to pick her up from the airport with me and that she could stay with us for one night. I mean, we trusted this girl. I was very open about my friendship with her. We had pictures and everything. So 2 weeks later, we pick her up from the airport, and we didn't click. She kind of annoyed me, but it was late and so we just went home. We get home and get her settled. We went up to my room and she gave me some presents and we chat a little bit. She then says, "Thanks for letting me stay here this semester." Huh? Excuse me? This semester? I asked her what do you mean? You can stay here tonight. We can see each other during the weekends if you want to hang out, but you can't stay here. She goes quiet. We go to sleep. At this point, I just wanted her to go away, and I got what I wanted. The next morning, I wake up and she's gone. I don't even know how she got out because we locked the doors at night, but she just vanished. We have special locks that you need a key for to open, and the key was somewhere else in the house. Her suitcase was still there. I tried calling her, but she didn't pick up. She eventually texted me, asking if my mother could drop off her suitcase at a train station 40 minutes away at a certain time. My mother brought the suitcase, and that was that. Never seen her or spoken to her again after that. Now that I think about it, I have a theory about why this went down like it did. She most likely put my address on her visa application as her place of residency during her stay, and needed to stay in my house in case immigration was going to check if she was actually there. When I was in high school, I met a guy from a different high school in a local chat room. We hit it off, and after a few days, we agreed to meet up at the store I worked at once I finished work. Well, I guess he showed up a little early with a friend and came through my check stand. I thought it was him since we'd swapped photos, but I was really shy and didn't want to be wrong. I waited for him to introduce himself, but he never did, and he and his friend paid for whatever they had and left without conversation. I was still hopeful that wasn't the guy, so I waited for him for an hour after my shift. Of course, he never showed, because that absolutely was the guy. He must have been disappointed when he met me in the checkout line, and instead of being a decent person and saying he wasn't interested, he just ghosted me. If I could go back in time, I definitely would have said something to him at the check stand. That's my one regret. When I was 14, I had an online friend 2 states away who was 14. He and his mom took a trip to see me, and the first thing we did when we saw each other was run full speed at one another. Our heads bounced off each other and I chipped my tooth and broke his braces. I'm pretty sure his front tooth was also loose and had to go to the dentist to fix it. A friend I had for 6 years flies over to Australia to hang with me for a month. Little did I know, he was a little bit taller than me. I was 5'10". He was, 6'7". I never knew he was this tall. He never talked about it. And when I was at the Brisbane airport waiting for him, I texted him stating, "I don't know where you are," to which he replied, "Look up." Towering over everyone is this blonde guy that has the arm span of the airport lobby. I cried, we laughed, and I regret bringing him over because my ceiling almost hits his head. It was my friend Kate who befriended this girl Jessica, who allowed us to come and stay with her when we traveled to the US. Jessica was rude to me instantly and kept my friend away from me. I'd go upstairs and she'd find a reason for them to go downstairs. She had Kate share her bedroom and she'd lock the door for hours, so I'd just go off and do my own thing. We met her 2 odd friends and they both ignored me. When it was time for Kate and I to move on to another state, Jessica insisted on coming with us. The lady we stayed with in another state, Robin, took no crap and called Jessica out on her strange behavior. Jessica proceeded to lock herself in a room and demanded Kate stay in there with her. They were in there all day, and eventually Kate came out and said to me that there's something wrong with Jessica and she's actually scared. Kate and I had plans to stay with another online friend, Matt, in another state, and Jessica demanded we cancel because she doesn't like or trust Matt. We said no, this is our holiday and we've paid for our flights, and Jessica then said she'll come with us, but we can't meet up with Matt. We said no, she cried, and we left. Kate blocked her on everything. Kate's mother called us not long after saying Jessica contacted her crying, saying Kate is in danger and that we abandoned Jessica, and she's so concerned for my friend's safety. It was actually incredibly scary. Kate later found out from another girl, Jane, they all knew each other from a forum, that Jessica had been telling everyone they were in love and had even slept together. I don't know how much of that is true, but I've known Kate for 20 years now, and she's never identified as anything other than straight. She denied it 100%. Jessica was just obsessed with her, and months later, Kate heard Jessica was telling everyone she was saving money to come to our country to find Kate. She never did, thankfully. Other than the time spent with this girl, we had a great holiday and made some good friends. I, 22-year-old female, had a 26-year-old male friend online for 11 years before we met. I'm Canadian and he's American. We met on a role-playing site when we were quite literally still kids and were a massive part of one another's lives, especially during our teenage years. We spoke every day through text, on the phone, had each other on social media. We even knew and sometimes spoke to each other's family and friends in real life. He called me his light and his sister, and I called him my brother. We were family. It would take a whole novel to explain our 11-year friendship and what we've been through together, but I'll just try to make it short by saying he had a very crappy and unstable life and had a lot of mental health problems. He was a narcissist. I spent many years being his emotional crutch and punching bag, helping him find jobs and being there for his breakdowns. I never broke off the friendship because after all those years, I kind of felt responsible for him. Anyway, last year we finally decided to meet. We were both grown adults and saved money to go on a 10-day trip to a dream destination of mine in the States. I knew this likely would not go well. I knew he was a narcissist, but I just had to meet him. I had to meet my brother, the guy that was there for over a decade. I needed to see him face to face. On this trip, he, 1, abandoned me on a mountain during a hike because he decided he wanted weed. When he came back, I was obviously mad and wanted to go back to our hotel, but he told me to wait for him in the car while he did the hike on his own. I took an Uber home and he returned as well 4 hours later. 2, automatically assumed I'd shell out $300 for him to buy a laptop he wanted without asking me, just brought me to the store to look around while we waited for our movie to start at the theater and sprung it on me. I refused. And 3, was overall inconsiderate. We only ate at places where he wanted to eat, when he wanted to eat, only did things he wanted to do and not me, despite the trip being my idea, and I missed out on a lot because he just wanted to sit around and do nothing. And so much more. What hurt the most is when I confronted him about it, he told me, "You're not my girlfriend. I don't need your approval or need to change for you to like me." I cut the friendship off and blocked him when we returned home. I also plan on retaking my dream trip one day and doing it properly this time. When I was 19, I jumped on a flight to meet a friend I had known for about 4 or 5 months. We both went through family bereavements and were a shoulder to cry on for each other, via the phone or internet, and we just decided to meet for a few days in a country between us. Until then, everything had been perfect. She was the coolest girl, really smart, the kind of person you want to be around all the time. When we met, things started great, but a day later she confessed, "You're not what I expected." What? 19 years old and not very confident, this knocked me sideways. "I don't know, you just seem different." I never hid who I was before we met and was completely open, and it put a real sour taste on the rest of my time with her. Instead of chatting nonstop and watching Jackass on TV in the hotel at night, we went quiet and straight to sleep, ate in silence. I put as much effort as I could into it, but I still never got to the bottom of how I was different. We went our separate ways, texted for a few days, and then never spoke again. Not quite an instant regret, but there were 2 people I was meeting, Macy and Maya, for the purpose of this story. We discussed meeting again, planned to have sleepovers, just generally have fun. The first day we meet up went really well. We all had a good time. I thought it went brilliantly. Then, a few weeks later, I found out they were carrying out all the plans, without me. They still have sleepovers to this day when Maya's back from uni, and I'm just left out. I don't speak to either of them anymore. It hurt. The worst part was, I'd met Macy a few times before and it was fine. This all happened after I met Maya at the same time. A few months down the line, Maya confessed she had a crush on me. Don't know if that played into it, but Never actually met him, but played Apex with a dude pretty regularly, almost every day. We finally exchanged info, and then he used to call me repeatedly in depressed fits and complain about how girls don't like him. It sucks because I wanted to help, but once it hit 36 calls in one day, I had to block. I actually worked with this lady at the time. She was good looking and very flirtatious. Most importantly, we both played World of Warcraft. She ended up inviting me to join her server, and of course me wanting to get closer to her, I joined. We played for a time and had a good PvP group going, her regular friends. Of course, she was still flirty with me in-game and I was back, all in group chat. Either way, we had some great times together slaying players in PvP. Summer comes and it's a company barbecue. I find out she's bringing one of our PvP partners to the event. Cool. It was her husband, a cop. I've been virtually flirting with her in-game in front of him for 3 months. In my case, he got freakishly obsessive and possessive. Met online through a fandom. After a few years, the fandom pretty much fell apart, but a handful of us stayed friends because we actually had a fair amount in common. D was very normal. The rest of the group seemed to love him. About 4 years after just being online mates, we met in person, and it went fine. We interacted a lot on social media. I had a really busy period in my life, but managed to squeeze in a Christmas get-together at my place for my little group of friends, including D. After that, my online activity decreased drastically due to being busy, and when I managed to get on Facebook, I noticed that most of the group were no longer friends with D. Weird, but whatever. I checked my messenger and saw message after message after message asking why I wasn't responding. What was I doing? Could we arrange a meetup? And things like that. I explained I was super busy and it was also coming up to the anniversary of my mom's death. So just give me some time and we'll see about meeting up another time. He said, "Oh, yeah, I forgot about the anniversary. You can have that day, but I expect a response after." Screw that. I blocked him. So he sent email after email after email asking me, "What is your problem? What do you think you're doing?" And things like that. So I blocked his email too. After 3 very peaceful weeks, there was a knock at my door. It was D, and he had a 6-page letter detailing why we had to be friends. I shut the door. I used an anonymous email thing to tell him if he contacted me again or showed up at my door, I would call the police. I went on Facebook and told everyone, including the 2 remaining mutual friends, about all of it, and could the mutuals not share anything about me and my life and actively discourage him from attempting to make contact? And the friends who had long since unfriended him started messaging me that they stopped talking to him because of how creepy he was being in PMs about me, always asking if they knew what I was doing. Had I talked to them? Was I seeing anyone? Or if I was actually busy, because he was convinced I wasn't, and things like that. In return, I told them how he'd been trying to convince me to stop being friends with them, because according to him, they were all sorts of horrible things, and that they were just incredibly jealous and hated how close he and I were. I assumed he was just butthurt because they stopped talking to him, so he was just making up a bunch of stuff about these people who had always been perfectly nice to me. One incredibly weird occurrence just before all this happened was telling me a mutual friend on Facebook that I was heading to the aquarium in London with my daughter, mutual friend also being in London that day with their daughter, and maybe we could grab a coffee and let the kids play in the park for a bit. I checked my messages later that evening and D was incredibly upset because he'd waited at Farringdon Station exit for 2 hours so he could come to the aquarium too, and I didn't show up. We didn't get off at that station, but one that was 2 stops after and closer to where we were going. I haven't heard a peep in over a year. He's apparently deleted his Facebook and Instagram and thankfully just disappeared. We met over a Dead by Daylight game. He was really charming, funny, and nice. Then he fell in love with one girl of our gaming group and they started a long-distance relationship. He even flew over to meet her in person. Turns out he's an abusive, narcissistic jerk who constantly belittled my friend. He gaslighted her and loved to play psycho games with our group. We stopped playing with him after a few weeks because he was so toxic to our group. Sadly, my friend struggled at that time and had difficulties breaking up with him. Took her several weeks to finally do it. She's so much better now. For my story, he wanted sex, I just wanted friendship. He had photos from when he was 16 as the only photos he shared. He was 24 and looked nothing like that now. So much so that I couldn't tell he was the same person as in the photos. I was barely 18 and inexperienced in the world. Money didn't impress me, but he kept trying anyway. Motorcycles terrify me, but he kept trying to up his bad boy image by telling me all about his. All in all, we were totally incompatible, but he kept trying. When I wouldn't bite, he decided I instantly hated him. That was more than 15 years ago. He's still using the same photos on meetup sites. I've called him out on it. He doesn't care. He says no one looks twice if he uses current photos. Truth is, it's his personality that sucks, not his face. I had a group of online friends for a bit, and I'm really close with my older brother, like best buds. And one day when we were playing League of Legends, I asked my brother to join after a while. I guess my brother was better at the game than me because they stopped inviting me to any games, so I was eventually separated from the group. One of them came to my state for an event and asked my brother if he wanted to go. He said yeah, and then asked me. I was a bit hesitant, but after my brother insisted, I went. I did have fun, but there were moments that made me remember I'm not really in that group anymore. For mine, the lady was crazy. We met through an app that was advertised as a meet friends app, and not a dating app. Well, turns out it was a dating app. However, she put in her bio that she was married with 2 kids. I put that I was in a long-term relationship and looking for friends. By the way, I'm a guy, she wasn't. So when we arranged to meet up, her husband and 2 kids were there as well as my girlfriend. Everything was going great. Hung out a few times and added each other on Facebook. Turns out she was super into the whole breastfeeding in public thing. Like, I get it. You go, girl. But she was super obsessed with it. 4 out of every 5 pics she posted to Facebook was her boob in her kid's mouth. She got angry when you looked away in public. Like, she wanted you to stare at her while she breastfed. Just got to the point that I was super uncomfortable with it and moved on. I met her after gaming with her for about a year and a half. My parents allowed me to have her visit for a weekend. Unbelievably beautiful girl. Had a lot of deep talks on the phone, were frequently flirting quite hard and stuff. She kind of was my first love interest. We went out for a drink with a few friends of mine, and she started hitting on my best friend the second she saw him. Didn't even pay attention to me the whole evening. And the first thing she said the next morning was, "Let's go to his place." That really hurt.
Law enforcers, have you ever come across a crime so stupid or ridiculous that you just let it slip? Not the US, to clarify for everyone asking. This was in South Africa in the early 90s. When I was in high school, the rugby team found out I had learned how to drive but not yet received my license. They all knew I did not drink, so one of them had the genius idea of inviting me to parties as the designated driver. We'd lost a popular kid to a drunken accident a few months earlier, so it was actually a good idea. It was a great arrangement, lots of parties, lots of girls, and all I had to do was get them home in one piece afterwards. It went great for a few weeks, until one night. The police had heard there was a big party on a farm outside of town and decided to set up a roadblock. So I come driving up to flashing lights, car filled with 5 big drunk guys, including one passed out with his head out of the window, and little scrawny me barely able to look over the steering wheel, and the inside of the car smells like a brewery. The officer takes one look at the car and asks me to step out. "Have you been drinking?" No, officer, I don't drink." Has me take a breathalyzer. 0. Looks at me. "Can I see your driver's license?" Sorry, officer, I don't have one yet. I'm getting it next week." And I point back toward the car, "But they have theirs." He looked at me, flipped his little book closed and said, "Just take them home. Next time I see you, you'd better have your license." Under the circumstances, this sounds like a pretty reasonable officer. Like, better the guy who's gonna get his license next week and sober be driving now than one of these guys be trying to. I overheard this one last night as I was sitting near 2 Indiana cops at Panda Express. So this lady had a warrant for an unpaid ticket and missed court date. I bring her in and it turns out that her address is wrong and she never got the court summons. The original ticket was for possession of a black bass under 14 inches, and since she admits the court summons, it was now on her record. So if she goes to apply for a job and they inevitably ask her, "Do you have any criminal history?" she's obligated to say yes. Now imagine if the employer asks, "Why?" "Because I caught a small fish." Maybe I'm dumb, but I am confused.
I was at a convenience store buying beer while 2 cops were milling around looking at soft drinks and snacks. One employee was working the register while another one was throwing out old donuts. One of the cops looked over at her and said,
"You can't do that in front of the police."
It was funny because he sounded upset with her when he said it.
Always nice when people have a good sense of humor.
My ex-fiancé was a cop for a redneck town where the people didn't have much money. He was called to the grocery store where a little girl about 9 was being detained in the manager's office for stealing a box of tampons. He said she had tears and snot everywhere and her pants had obvious bloodstains all over the front. My ex then bought the box she was trying to steal along with 3 more boxes, some food and milk. He then drove her home to a trailer that was falling apart. It wasn't so much the crime that was ridiculous, but more the manager's reaction. I guess when my ex came in, the manager was just screaming at this terrified 9-year-old.
That's a nice story, a fine story, a good story. But my question is, what did you do to drive away such a good man? A kid, of course, I don't know the ins and outs of their relationship. I frequently, or did when I was in uniform, let impaired care or control slide. If I found someone sleeping in the back seat of their parked car after drinking, it demonstrated to me a decision to not drink and drive. I'd often take keys or drive someone home, but arresting them just seemed wrong. Long as they're not obstructing traffic or in a really inconvenient place, I think that makes perfect sense. I was the lucky one once, not charged by a cop. In college, my friend had a massive house party. I woke up the next morning face down in a puddle of drool in the bed of my truck. Went inside and found out the cops had busted the party and everyone got underage tickets. Over 30 people, except for me. Not sure if they took pity on me or never saw me, but they had my truck boxed in with squad cars. The lines on my face from the rubs on my bedliner took 2 days to go away. Well, aren't you a lucky boy? Not a police officer, but I witnessed it happen. I got a phone call from a police officer using my buddy's phone. Apparently, my buddy, a jackass, got so drunk he fell out of his car in the drive-thru lane at Taco Cabana. The cop told me I had 15 minutes to get there and pick up my friend. I made it in time and the officer helped me throw my friend in the bed of my truck. He told me to take my friend home and when he woke up, tell him he was a goddamn idiot. The police officer was a homicide detective in the major city in which we lived, and he said he had real crimes to solve and to stop wasting his time.
You better take your drunk little jackass friend home. I got donuts to eat, coffee to drink, and murders to solve.
A long time ago in a life far removed from my own, I had a nasty dope addiction. I cleaned up my life and had been clean for 3 years. My friend had been learning to become a tattoo artist and asked me if I wanted one. To repay his kindness, I picked up a 30-pack and some tequila. After about 3 hours of him digging in with the gun and most of the beers and booze gone, we came up with the plan. We were going to go to the city and score some dope. Didn't take long and we accomplished just that. We found a nice, quiet, dimly lit parking lot to pull in and get to getting high. We break out the gear and started. He got his ready faster and got it done. I was out of practice and fumbled around a bit. Just then, someone knocked on the window. It's the cops. We rolled down the window and they asked if we knew where we were. Before we can say anything, the cop said, "This is the fucking police station parking lot. Are you freaking thick?" They took the dope and sent us on our way, and I now have 13 years clean thanks to that cop. You know, in times like that, I can't help but think that well, if you're that stupid or just unaware of your environment, then yeah, you deserve to be arrested. But in this case, I guess things worked out. There was this guy where I used to live who would walk around smiling strangely and approach people trying to shake their hand. As soon as he got a hold of their hand, he would try to kiss them. A friend of mine naively accepted his handshake and literally bent over backward trying to avoid the kiss. A couple of churches in the area had this thing at the end of their service where everyone would shake hands so this guy would show up to reap the harvest. Cops were called on him a few times, but to my knowledge, they never arrested him, but just drove him far away from the area and dropped him off and made him walk all the way back. I'm just picturing that interaction as, "Oh, well, nice to make your acquaintance, old chap. What are you doing?" Brother-in-law is a cop. We'll call him Jack. He used to ride a bike in downtown Toronto during his first 2 years. Canadian cops ride in bikes and wear tight shorts during summer, by the way. So he was on a side street when he spotted a car driving like 10 kilometers an hour and every 5 seconds stopping suddenly like someone hitting their brakes hard and starting again. So he follows the car going around in a 4-block circle wondering, what the hell? He decided to check if maybe something is wrong with the driver and needed help. He gets close to the car and he hears the driver, which was male, groaning. He immediately thought the driver was having a health issue. He rides up to the driver's window and puts his hand on the car and at the same time asking, "Sir, are you all right?" Driver slams his brakes and Jack sees a female lifting her head off his lap and hastily, the driver covering his crotch. He tried so hard not to burst out laughing. Driver was so embarrassed when Jack asked for license and registration. He said it was also obvious the woman wasn't a hooker because of her looks and the red face of shame. So the driver croaks up "Is there something wrong, officer?" officer while my brother Jack was looking at his license. Jack told the driver that he was driving too slow and he seemed to be in distress, and next time he would be better off trying not to have engaged in a sexual manner while behind the wheel. He said all that in a very stern voice while looking at the guy straight in the eyes. He didn't give him a ticket or arrest him. When he returned back to the police station, he relayed the whole story to his buddies. They call him Spoilsport Jack now. It might sound a bit juvenile to say, but I love earning nicknames in the workplace. My time to shine. Now, I was the lawbreaker in this case, but the cop was so utterly dumbfounded and amused that he just let us go. Let me tell you the story of the 12-person Prius. It was around 10 p.m. on a Friday night and was my first day in college. It was freshman orientation day during the summer, and we got to stay in a dorm for the night. While my group was getting to know each other, we decided that we should find something fun to do. However, being in a small town, our options were limited. Thus, we decided upon visiting the glorious Walmart in town, about the most fun place to go. Our plans were thwarted though when we discovered that we were all dropped off by our parents and didn't have a car. We sure as hell weren't going to walk 8 miles and we didn't know what to do. But then, the twins piped up. The identical twin sisters apparently didn't come with their parents and instead borrowed their parents' Toyota Prius for the weekend. Great! So, with a car ready to go, we start for the parking lot, but then somebody did a head count and mentioned to the group that we have 12 people. Our hearts sank. How could we bring 12 people to Walmart with a Prius? One person suggested taking 2 trips. One person said maybe we shouldn't go. But then somebody suggested that we all squeeze in. It was brilliant. And after thinking about it, 100% feasible. So we got to work. 2 people in the passenger seat, 1 driving, 7 in the rear seat, and 2 in the trunk. It was a masterpiece. Thus the journey began. Nearly touching the ground and easily bottoming out the suspension, we set forth for Walmart. We got about half a mile from campus before we were pulled over. The cop was speechless as he counted as each person exited the car. Sergeant Casper, his name was. Casper was the friendly cop. He could barely contain his laughter. He simply told us that he didn't want us getting hurt, that we should walk back to campus, and that he was impressed that we fit that many people in the car. We sat there and chatted for about 20 minutes and left, never to fit in the Prius again. Casper, the friendly cop, the friendliest cop you know. My wife got pulled over one night while I was riding in the passenger seat. She was driving my car and it didn't have automatic headlights and she forgot to flip the switch. The cop walks up and gets both our licenses, checks them and walks back. He issues my wife a warning, then gives me a ticket for presenting an expired license to an officer. He tells me it's the same as presenting a fictitious license to an LEO, and it's a $250 fine. I was confused because I had just renewed my license a year earlier, but before I could ask, he had ran back to his cruiser and drove off. Sure enough, he wrote down my license issue date as the expiration date. So I go to court to fight it, take a day off work, wait around at the courthouse for 3 hours. Finally, my case gets cancelled and I talk to an AITA. He says if my license is current now, then I'm off with just court costs. I explain the mistake the officer made. His eyes glaze over and says, if we go to the judge, it's gonna be the full line. I explain again and he says, fine, we will go to the judge. Another hour later, the judge calls the case and I explain it again. He asks to see the citation and the ticket. I present them. He looks at it and his face kind of squishes up in a what the hell look. His exact words were, who is the dumb butt cop wasting my time? Charges dismissed. For those who don't know, I say for those who don't know, the actual quote from the judge are words that I am not at liberty to say. I once got pulled over for speeding 15 over. I had just gotten Taco Bell, and when he asked me why I was going so fast, I said that I'm just really excited to eat my Taco Bell. He laughed, gave me my license back, and let me go, saying that was the funniest excuse he had heard all day. I think that's as valid a reason as any to let someone go on a speeding ticket. I was on foot patrol in central London about 2 in the morning. I turned a corner and saw a group of very drunk ex-public, privately schooled for you colonials, schoolboys staggering along the road with a collection of the usual ubiquitous parking cones. They had about 10 cones between the 5 of them. I stood there for about 5 minutes, walking this lot sodding about, when one of them spotted me. He then made an attempt to warn his friends that he had spotted me, but they were so drunk they didn't take any notice. He then gathered as many cones off of his friends that he could carry, staggered up to me and said, Officer, I would like to hand these over to you as I think they are lost property. I burst out laughing and walked away. Typical, such a typical drunk juvenile act to do in England. I was young and went out to buy some condoms at a store. I spent a long time standing there trying to figure out what to get. Finally grab a box, then wander around the store working up the nerve to actually purchase it. I chicken out, put them on some random shelf, then go walk out of the store. As I get to the door, some lady in her 40s comes running up to me and in a slightly out-of-breath voice demands I hand over the condoms. I'm shocked and answer, wide-eyed, that I don't have them. She doesn't believe me, so I sheepishly lead her to where I ditched them. As I leave again, I realize just buying them would have been a lot less stressful. My advice for buying condoms is just slam the pack down and do not break eye contact no matter what. They'll respect you because you're practicing safe sex. I was hammered one day walking home with a bunch of my friends. I see a trash can and run and drop kick it. Of course, it sends trash everywhere, and all I hear on a PA is, pick it up. Cop there the whole time, never got out of the car. I picked up the trash can and put all the trash back and went on my way. Cool cop. Give a hoot, don't pollute. When I was in high school, my buddy and I left during lunch to go get our biology cat that he'd left at home. A biology cat is one that's being dissected. It was all splayed out and opened up on a dissection tray, essentially a baking sheet filled with wax so you could stick pins in it. We took off in another friend's car, a Beetle with no muffler and flat tires, and screaming to Mac's house about a mile away in a little lower middle-class neighborhood. Got the cat, put it on the back seat, and threw a dish towel over it because, well, it's just creepy. As I'm backing out the driveway, Mac tells me to be cool. There's a cop down at the intersection. We putter down the street and stop at the stop sign, and suddenly we're surrounded. Plainclothes cops come up and block us behind. Two standard cop cars come from each side of the intersection and block us in front. A cop gets out and yells at us to turn off the car and step out. We're freaked because we know that the car has all kinds of illegal substances hidden away in the glove box behind the dash. Under the seat, we also have no idea why driving fast and loud in this neighborhood warranted such a massive response. We get out, hands on the hood. Officer starts to search the car. We tell him about the biology cat and point to the back seat. He lifts the dish towel up, looks at us, and stops searching the car. Everyone backs off and he tells us to get back to school, and if I wasn't busy right now, I'd haul you in for speeding in a residential neighborhood. Get your muffler fixed. After school, we found out that someone had been murdered in the neighborhood earlier that morning. 2 male suspects seen leaving the area. Our biology teacher laughed his butt off. Never so grateful for a murder in my life. I understand the relief, but I certainly wouldn't say it like that. Not a cop, but I was driving to North Carolina. It was supposed to be my brother and I driving, but he went out the night previous and got hammered, thinking I'd drive the first leg, then he'd finish it out. Well, he miscalculated how hungover he was and was useless the entire way. This was a 12-hour drive, but when we finally got there, my brother starts complaining at me. He needs to use the bathroom. We were in the city at this point during rush hour, so I was stuck in the left lane among a great deal of traffic. There was a left turn that could get me to a Wendy's, so I jumped into the lane. The green turn arrow became yellow, so I started slowing down. My parents and brother all scream some variation of, just frickin' go! So I do it, and sure enough, I see the lights go on, pull into the Wendy's parking lot and turn off the car. A large woman gets out of a cop car. I swear she is straight from a buddy cop movie as the loud-mouthed comic relief, permed hair and all. She walks up and looks totally serious. My brother is in the backseat, hungover, pale and sweating. He leans forward and blurts out, "Can I please go inside while you do this? I'm about to poo my pants." Her serious tone just completely drops and she starts laughing her butt off. "Of course, honey, you can go." He jumps out and runs into the building doing the funniest butt clench I've ever seen. She ends up giving me a warning because she saw me hit the brakes, then heard everyone screaming at me. She warned everyone to not distract the driver and told me to ignore everyone else, which I know I should have done. So everything worked out well, and my brother ends up coming out with Frosties for the family because they wouldn't let him use the bathroom without buying anything. I would have just immediately forgiven them once they brought me the Frosty. If it's ice cream, a ice lolly, a slush puppy of some kind, if it's a frozen treat and you're trying to curry favor with me, well, you've got it, baby, you've got it. When I was in college, I woke up one morning to knocking on my door. I sleep naked, so just grabbed what was on my floor. It was a tank top and a frilly pink skirt. I opened the door to see a cop. At this point, I am experiencing the absolute worst hangover in the world and very possibly still partially drunk. He tells me that the landlord is paving the back parking lot and I need to move my car. I look at him and tell him there is no way I can drive it this time, and so if they need to move it, they might want to do it themselves. Meanwhile, he is clearly holding back some laughter. He agrees to move my car for me and bring back my keys. I told him to wait a minute while I get them. Still trying to contain his laughter, he says, Ma'am, they were actually in your door. I'm completely mortified and feel like death now. He returns 5 to 10 minutes later and tells me he moved it to the other section of the lot. I go back to sleep and a few hours later leave to go to class. Well, the car is absolutely nowhere in sight. I find a cop car parked not too far away and tell him what happened. He called into the cop and it turns out the landlord had it towed. The first cop shows back up, apologizes, and offers to take me to the tow lot to get the car. On the way there, he decides to show off a little and is speeding through red lights and across town. It was pretty thrilling. The PD ended up paying for my towing fee. I mentioned the pink skirt because while we were on our way to the tow yard, he told me that he was holding back his laughter because the last thing he expected to see was a hungover girl wearing a tutu at 8 a.m. Apparently, that's what it looked like to him. And after seeing the keys in the door and what I had on, he envisioned the hangover type evening for me. This does not really fit the question of the post, but there are a lot of stories here of good guy cops helping out idiots in need, and thought it was in a way relevant. I mean, that's precisely why I've been enjoying these stories quite a lot. I once woke up at the back door of a Chicago home inside their 8-foot fenced and secured yard. I was awoken by 8 cops yelling at me and shining their lights on me, telling me to exit the yard and come to them. There was no way to get out of the yard and the homeowner had to come take a lock off the gate to let me out. I was asked where my shoes were, where I lived, how I got there, and what the hell was going on. I explained I went to bed on my friend's couch around 10. Inside my pockets they found a giant glass pipe and an even bigger piece of devil's lettuce cola bud. After some serious what the hell looks and giggles from the greatest cops in the world, I found myself being given a ride 2 blocks away to my friend's house. I apologized for being a sleepwalking idiot and for the illegal substances, which I then realized was still in my pocket thanks to some pretty awesome Chicago cops. They do sound like some pretty understanding and cool cops. But for real, how the hell did you sleepwalk 2 blocks away? I mean, the most I've ever seen someone sleepwalk is like 5 feet and then pee on a television set.
When I was 18, I got pulled over. Policeman asks, "Do you know why I pulled you over?" I say, "Yes, because I did an illegal U-turn." He says, "No, because you ran a stop sign." He was so amused by my stupidity that he let me go.
Some of these policemen sound extremely easy to please. My friends and I were driving home one Saturday night and spotted a car that looked like it had veered off the main drag and up against a building. We approached the car and tried to see if the driver was okay, but he was unresponsive, so we called 911 and the police showed up. They roused him and started asking him questions such as, did he have ID? No. What was his name? He didn't know. What was his address? He wasn't sure. The more he talked, the dumber and more stoned he sounded. They asked him if he lived in Portland, the city where this was occurring. He replied, "Portland?" Like he had never heard of the place. They then asked if he was from Beaverton, Vancouver, Gresham, Oregon City, Hillsborough, etc. Each time he responded as if he never heard of any of the cities mentioned. The cops paused as if they had run out of questions to ask, so I thought I might be able to help. I asked the driver if he lived in Oregon. He stonily replied, "Where's that?" I informed him it was on the west coast of the USA between Washington and California. He asked, "USA? What's that?" I replied that it's the main country in North America. "North America?" he says with more confusion. "Yes," I tell him. "North America is one of the continents of planet Earth. Are you familiar with planet Earth?" At this point, both officers are giggling and no longer asking any questions, deferring to my interrogation. The driver looked up in the sky for a few seconds, then returned his glassy gaze to me. "Earth?" he asked. I replied that Earth is the 3rd planet in this planetary system around the star called Sol. "Where's that?" he wanted to know. I replied that Sol was located in the spiral arms of the Milky Way galaxy. Perhaps he was from somewhere in the Milky Way galaxy. That did not seem to ring a bell with him. I asked, "What about the Andromeda galaxy? Might you be from there?" He got a bit excited and indicated that the Andromeda galaxy sounded quite familiar. I turned to the officers and informed them he's from the Andromeda galaxy. They were laughing to the point where there were tears streaming from their eyes. I turned back to the driver and asked, "Are you here for the weekend or just passing through?" He hadn't decided yet. I was very interested in how he was able to get his VW bug from galaxy to galaxy, but he wasn't willing or able to share that technology with me. A shame. The police officers give him a ride back to the local detox center where I'm sure he was able to meet some fellow traveler and share good times. Whatever that boy was smoking, it pretty near gave him amnesia. That is crazy. Doesn't even know what galaxy he's from.
Men of Reddit, what would be your response to a guy who suddenly starts flirting with your girl? Had a guy buy our margaritas when my girlfriend ordered them for us at the counter. I thanked him from across the restaurant. Free margaritas taste better. My friend ordered a girl's drink at the bar once. Right after the bartender handed it to her, her boyfriend walks over. So what does my friend do? He orders a drink for the boyfriend too. 5 minutes later, I look over and all three of them are sitting next to each other, best freaking friends. I took some notes from that guy. He didn't buy her a drink expecting something from her. He just wanted to make her happy. And when he found out that she had a boyfriend, he wanted to make him happy too. And people like him because of that. I bought a birthday party, girl celebrating her 30th, and I got a nasty look from them. One of them came up to me and threw the drink in my face, saying, "We're not gonna sleep with you over a drink." Bouncer kicked them out after the bartender clarified that I didn't say a word and was being nice. Yes, Bouncer assumed I was harassing them at first. The good news is I got free drinks for the rest of the night. Am I the only one who thinks that I have a boyfriend or assuming all men want you is very childish? My wife had a guy offer to buy her drinks, and when he said that she was married, he said something to the effect of, "Then let me buy the lucky man his drink instead." Which I thought was a great way to handle it. Gets you a bar friend most of the time since the guy gets a free drink, and if he's a jealous or protective type, he will respond better because someone didn't end up buying his girl a drink. Went out with another couple, walking through the area filled with bars. We hear some guys catcalling our lady friend. Something along the lines of, "Yo, you're so hot, I would give it to you." And her boyfriend replies back, "And nothing for me?" This is the way I wish I would handle this situation, but my brain would probably be like, "What did he say? I can't hear you because it's so loud in here." I looked at the dude and said, "Sorry dude, you're not my sister's type." And then I immediately kissed my wife. We were both blonde, so people think we were related all the time. Gosh, I have to have my husband do this sometime. We used to work together and people would come in all the time asking if we were brother and sister. I'd step in and say something, not because I feel like I need to or because my wife can't handle herself, but because I know her and she likes the feeling of being looked after. I know this because she told me. That's very sweet. Just because you stand strong doesn't mean that you should always have to. It's good to know that you have backup whether it's your friends or your husband. I once let my girlfriend handle a situation like that on her own. And the thing I learned in the process is that it takes a woman a lot more work to deter an aggressive guy. As soon as I stepped in, Handsy McNoBoundaries apologized to me. Not the stranger whose butt he touched and complimented. She could absolutely handle the situation on her own, and my first impulse was not to treat her like a possession some other guy was touching. But on some levels, it does feel like I'm condoning the behavior. This is very true. I was out with my ex one night walking my dogs. My ex got sidetracked and stopped to take some photos of a lizard basking on the side of the road. Not wanting my dogs to stress or spook the lizard, I told him that I was going to keep walking ahead. He said that he would catch up with me and he was about a half a block behind me. I went around the corner and two men saw and started aggressively catcalling me, making comments on my skin, body, and following me. I told them to leave me alone and I wasn't interested. They didn't care and kept at it. They completely ignored my discomfort and were starting to actually frighten me. My ex came around the corner, saw the two guys were way too close to my personal space, and asked what was going on. They immediately apologized to him and backed off. Not the woman that they were actually harassing and scaring just seconds ago. They apologized to him. It's genuinely heartbreaking how much faster and easier it can be for a man to get another man to leave a woman alone than for the same woman to get that man to leave her alone. It's worrying to me how common that can be. It is pretty sad that women do have to deal with this type of stuff on a daily basis. Nothing. She is beautiful and I get it. When she shoots them down and they keep trying is when I step in because it's harassment at that point, and that's a problem. Exactly. I had a customer invite my wife on a helicopter ride the other day, totally trying to chat her up. When he asked what she did there, she pointed at me and said, "I'm just hanging out. I'm married to him." After that, you could see him deflate like a balloon. Nothing. My wife just says, "Shh, watch this." Ask him if he's down for a three-way and make him uncomfortable. That seems dangerous if you're not actually down for a three-way. Lots of dudes out there would be perfectly happy to make a wobbly H with you and your lady. Well, that's when you tell him that he goes in the middle. I have to agree with that second comment. It is definitely a dangerous game of chicken. Sharing a lady with another man isn't my cup of tea, but I know plenty of dudes that would have absolutely no problem with it. It's like free food to them. My wife is gorgeous in my eyes, but she is incredibly hard on herself. After kids, antidepressants, and being 20 years older than when we first started dating, she doesn't always see that she's the most beautiful person to me. So when someone else starts talking to her and wants to get in her pants, I just tell her I told you so. I pinch his butt and say we're down, but he bottoms, no exceptions. She's a grown-up, she can respond to his flirting herself. I don't need to jump in and do the whole back off buddy thing. my girlfriend who is 40, is often pretty useless in handling those situations, giving out unintentional yes signals, further aggravating the situation. She's openly and immediately accepting of compliments in general, but also somewhat blind to more subtle flirtation. So someone flirting with her can take her positive response to a compliment as a green light. It's like she can't distinguish between the friendly and flirtatious "you look hot," and acts if they're all friendly compliments. If someone touches her, she can get uncomfortable and act like it's not happening, possibly post-trauma or fight or flight freeze response, which can come off as being okay with that kind of contact. Someone aggressively tries to kiss her, she'll tend to turn her face away and laugh or giggle, but that doesn't give a clear no response, so she can come off as just being coy. She's aware that she often has no sense that a situation has hookup intent, or is headed in that direction if encouraged. And also talked a good bit about this with people. Usually it'll be when something happens out of nowhere. She'll talk to people about it over a week or two, trying to figure out what she missed. She'll digest their opinions and advice on what to look for and how to handle such situations in the future. But it just becomes a story that will sometimes pop up in conversation. I don't think she's improved in spotting flirtation or nipping it in the bud with a clear no sign. And her way of handling those situations for the past decade or so has been to ask people around her, including me, to watch out for her when she's in an environment where flirtation is likely. To answer the OP's question, my job is to give a clear no sign or just remove her from the situation. I'm not sure how her friends handle it because I'm not always around, but I do know of one situation where they did nothing, but I imagine it's because they thought, she's an adult, she can make her own decisions, much like what you said, and one would generally assume until they know better. So there are people who need someone to keep an eye out for them and intervene before things get aggressive, as they have on more than one occasion for my GF. This was a great follow-up comment. I sometimes get annoyed with the "she's a big girl" comments because it assumes that women can easily handle or get out of any situation that is presented in front of them. If he's not making her uncomfortable, I don't care. She's coming home with me, our dog is at home, and she really likes him. Flirt with her too. It's a competition now. I was at a house party and my girlfriend at the time was getting hit on by a couple of guys. I walked up to her like I didn't know her and told her how good looking she was and that I wanted to kiss her. I kissed her and she wrapped her arms around me. When we stopped, I told her that I would talk to her later and just walked away. As I did, the guys hitting on her just looked at me in awe. I tell him good luck and watch her roast him. My GF is a bartender, so she's witty AF. I love it when people try hitting on her and she just shoots them down hard. Pure comedic gold. I'm glad I never did that. That cruel insult when someone isn't being offensive, but is too inexperienced to have game, yet is just trying to get someone to like them, will be remembered for a lifetime. I agree with that last comment. Men who don't have game will definitely remember every rejection they get. If a guy is being a complete douche though, feel free to knock him down a peg. If I didn't trust her, she wouldn't be my girl. Some guy giving her a confidence boost is fine with me. According to my girl, I wouldn't even be aware of flirting because I can't take a hint even if it's right in front of my face. I'd probably join the chat, then casually ask my wife what time we told the kids we'd be home. This happened to me not too long ago. My wife is nice and likes to chat people up when she's drinking. Naturally, a lot of guys think that means she's into them. We were at a concert, and I guess the guy assumed that since she talked to him, that she and I were just friends. They only spoke once or twice, but she was dancing and drinking and he had just hung around. After the concert, he came up and started in. By then, I had enough of him checking her out, so I pulled the old, "let's get out of here, I'm sure the babysitter is ready to go home," and the guy just vanished like a puff of smoke. We were both wearing our wedding rings. I would enjoy the show, or possibly be busy hitting on his wife. Did I mention that we're swingers? Swingers are always out here needing to make themselves known to the world. If she's taken by another man by simply talking or flirting, is she really my girl in the first place? I might laugh if it was particularly bold or egregious right in front of my face or something, but I never intervene unless she asks me to. She's an adult and she can decide for herself if she wants to entertain a conversation. Also, selfishly, I like to see if I can get a free drink out of it if it's occurring at the bar. My best friend is naturally drop-dead gorgeous. One night we went out and had quite a few drinks at a tap house nearby, and when we got back, I mentioned to her husband that literally every head in the room turned when she walked in, and that the bartender seemed to blush every time he talked to her. It was more for her benefit, because she doesn't realize how beautiful she is. He got pissed, like what the freak? You marry a beautiful woman and you're mad when people notice her? Makes no sense. Shake my head. Dude missed a chance to hype up his wife. What's even worse, she felt guilty for it. He's actually a great husband and father. I honestly don't think he realizes what a jerk he is when he comes up with that stuff. Man, so many guys want to date a 10, but they don't want the attention that comes with it. My wife constantly gets hit on. I don't care if men hit on her. I trust her completely and have since the start. She has never given me a reason not to trust her. When we used to go out to bars together, she would get hit on. Guys would offer to buy her drinks. She would always tell them my drink of choice. After she got the drinks, she would thank them and walk away and hand me the drink. If people don't respect her boundaries, that's when I step in. We never really had any bad experiences with men hitting on her. Normally, once they see her with me, they basically just walk away. It depends on the situation. Most of the time, I think, good luck, man. Hope she doesn't embarrass you. I know she's coming home with me at the end of the day. If the guy is obviously creepy or making her uncomfortable, I typically step in and make sure he gets the point. I'm not a small guy, so they usually get the idea. I don't really care for confrontation or violence, but with that said, I won't tolerate someone harassing my wife or making her feel uncomfortable. It gets a little awkward when you're a small guy. I'm not pint-sized, but I'm 5'7" and about 165 to 170. I'm not intimidating to most men. Had two offensive line-looking dudes catcalling my fiance in a bar a few years ago. She just ignored them for the first 2 times. Biggest issue was that they were out with her dad. I had to walk over and explain the situation to the 2 gentlemen and let them know that I wasn't looking for a fight, but I wasn't going to allow it to continue. Luckily, I knew the entire staff at the bar, and the bartender came over to ask if everything was good. I told him, in pretty good Spanish, that I was fine, and if I needed help, I would let him know. I'm super white, but these 2 dudes didn't understand a word of what I said. Definitely helped that the bartender went back to the kitchen for a few minutes afterwards. Yeah, not looking intimidating can be a problem. I'm average size-wise. I was once in a club with my girlfriend, and some guys were harassing her and her friends. Now, I wasn't really in a mood to deal with it, but when one of them tried to touch them, I immediately called them out. They were a bit buff and thought that they would win the fight. Bit of background, I've been doing martial arts since I was 4, and not some recreational stuff, but with actual fighting. I actually met my girlfriend there. I'm usually a pretty mellow guy, but that day wasn't great to begin with. She knew I wasn't in a good mood, and when she noticed, she immediately stood behind me and grabbed my pants and belt from behind. It was pretty effective. If push came to shove, she wouldn't have held me back, but I felt it and that was enough. It was a pretty big commotion, and one of them even tried to push me, but that's when security showed up and threw them out. I think if I would have been bigger, they would have just left earlier, but on the plus side, they were thrown out and couldn't continue harassing other girls. This is one of the main reasons I don't like clubs or being at bars too much. I'm not a drinker myself, so seeing a bunch of dudes being douchey or gross towards women isn't a fun time. If he isn't physically touching her, I would see what her reaction is. If she reciprocates, then I would leave because I just dodged a bullet. If she shoots him down, I make my presence known to prevent any potential negative reaction from the guy towards her. I challenge him to a unicycle cage match. Younger me would be confrontational. Mid-30s me would be curious to see how it goes, and if by some surprise she's into it, then she just revealed something about her and us that I really needed to know anyways. That is a statement to live by. Why would I have to respond to somebody flirting with my girl? I trust my girl. That's why she's my girl. She's an adult and more than capable of handling this sort of situation. Now, if it became too much or he was stalking or abusive or anything over the top, then you have to be dealt with. But if there's just some guy flirting with my woman, great. It validates that I'm with a very attractive, interesting woman that other people find the same. She's a big girl and I trust her. I hope you know what you're getting into, my guy. I'm telling you as a friendly warning. I dated a Marine. I was a Navy corpsman. While she liked knowing I had her back, she also liked standing up and showing guys how tall she really was without heels. Did I mention that she was a Marine? I gotta admit, seeing 3/4 of the men brush off the warning from a short Asian guy, only to find out my warning was valid, their eyes went from her bust to her overtowering them. Oh, by the way, she's 6 foot. I forgot to mention that. I didn't have to worry about her being taken. She had a thing for short Asian men. 3/4 of the men that hit on her were all macho white men. So she got off on showing them her true height. Then she would walk over to me, wrap her arms around me, evidently marking her territory, like a dragon claiming her prince, with a dangerous look in her eye. That got me off. Hey now, it's fun climbing trees. I just keep a close eye on the situation. My wife can be really nervous, but also a bit fiery, and if I see her starting to get uncomfortable or the guy becoming too much, then I'll step in. Other than that, I don't mind. It just proves what I already know. My wife is a beautiful woman. I like to sit back and enjoy the show. My wife is completely oblivious to this stuff, and then later is mortified when I point out that she was totally being flirted with. It's always a good time. I've seen a few guys try it and just feel bad for them. She generally shoves her huge ring in their face and yells at them. Once we were out with some friends and some guy tried to grab her waist. She yelled and slapped his drink right into his face. Most guys would get worked up and defend their girl. I just find it a blast to watch her go off on creepy dudes and put them in their place. She's the best and I love her to freaking death. Cheers to 9 years, my love. Nothing. It's the highest compliment to me when guys hit on my wife at a bar. I'm a 6 and my wife is an honest 8. So it really speaks to my charm if you ask me. Bonus if her drinks are on their tab. Lady of Reddit here. My fiance is a DJ at a bar that I used to work at. So I would go and hang out with him and all my old friends that still work there. I ended up sitting by myself near his DJ set and guys would come up to my table constantly. When they would ask where my boyfriend was, I would point to my fiance and give them the bro nod. They usually got the point from there. There was this one time when I was like 7 months pregnant and sitting at the high top. This kid, couldn't have been more than 19, comes up and asks me why I'm all alone and looking so sad. First off, rude, and not a great pickup line. So I smile, stand up, and turn to the side to show him my belly and say, "I'm not alone, silly." He looks dumbfounded and walks away without another word. Good times. The "so sad" is such a bad pickup line, but I can totally see my cringe younger self saying that. If you get worried because your partner gets flirted with, then either you have trust issues or your partner's the wrong partner. Because with the right one, you just trust them. And the amount of people on social media with replies with something like, "Well, good luck with that, buddy boy. You're getting your girl stolen," is exactly the reason why you can't find a good partner. They aren't able to judge a good person, trust them, or create a healthy relationship. And sometimes stuff will happen, but why do I get the feeling if you were able to create a healthy relationship, it would happen way less? Honestly, first, I'd probably need to let her know she was being hit on. She is not good at recognizing when a dude is into her, by her own admission. So us being us, I would probably low-key send her this exact text. "You know that dude is trying to hit on you, right? Let's make him think we're serial killers." At this point, we would start totally playing into his advances, but occasionally saying things like, "We can have guests over, right? Everything's sharpened." Or, "I can fit 15 people in my van if they're folded right and not too stiff yet." Or something like, "How long do you think you can hold your breath?" You know, like, against your will. We don't get out much. My girlfriend is a little out of my league. Not to say that I don't clean up nice, but she is a little out of my league. Apparently this was noticed by a guy at a party. He came up to my girlfriend and myself, and since my girlfriend was in the middle of a conversation, he started talking to me. Soon, when my girlfriend was finishing her conversation, he says to me without much preface, "Hey, make me look good." Now, first of all, I have no idea exactly how he expected me to make him look good, but I asked him, "For this girl? This girl right here? My girlfriend? I mean, we could try, but I don't think she'll go for you." He turned pretty red, and without saying much else, he immediately turned around and left the group. I yelled out, "Where are you going? This isn't making you look good." My girlfriend loves when I tell that story. Is the flirting in person or via text, email, or social media? If it's in person, that can be pretty hot if you work it out right. If it's the other, then you gotta trust that they will do the right thing. Nothing other than how you respond is in your control. My wife and I don't wear rings, and a few weeks ago we were at the bar and a dude came right up to her and made his move. Gotta give the guy some props, really. She flirted back, cause that's okay for us, and he figured out soon enough that this wasn't his day. But it worked out for great fantasy talk that night, so thanks, buddy. This story reminded me of that episode of that 70s show when Fez gets used by a girl at the bar for a roleplay fantasy with her husband. First, I'd turn red with anger. Then I'd slowly stew and sweat until I had a plan formed. Next, I'd down a few shots of cheap whiskey, while my girl pestered me about what the freak was wrong with me, as I made no eye contact and said nothing, slowly gathering my rage into an irresistible force of righteous indignity. I've been here before. I said it to myself, and it never ended well. Before the night was out, one of us always regretted the choices we made that day, but so far, it hadn't been me. Some might say I'd been lucky. I'd say I was just brave. The kind of brave you get when you down a few shots of cheap whiskey. Real brave. So I step up to face my nemesis like a knight of old to defend the honor of my fair maiden by proudly and loudly stating, "Hey, you got a problem with me, bro?" Happened more than once cause my wife is a looker and she's got some assets. The moment I press them, they see my cauliflower ear and totally back off. Those dudes are scum deliberately. They try to make weak dudes look like pushovers. The one time I played punch the face, I became the bad guy and Chad became the poor victim. Couldn't believe people got upset at me. I'd pull my pants down and do the helicopter while screaming like a deranged penguin. That'll show 'em. There's always that one guy in the group that will do the helicopter to protect his girl.
To those of you who earn a good salary in a low-stress job, what do you do? I'm a medical radiation technologist. I think my job is one of the least stressful. We don't work long hours like nurses and doctors, and our only main priority is to take diagnostic images of patients. But once we're done, they're taken away by porters, so we spend little time on patients. At the end of the day, when we finish our hours, we just head home and relax. I find it a relaxing job. Gets easier the better your skill set, and there's usually people to help you. This is strictly for x-rays only, not CT or MRI, of which is more stressful since you're on a schedule. I kind of like my job. I'm an operator at a nuke plant. I make up to $180K depending on how much overtime I work. If I don't work overtime, I make $140K and only work 32 to 48 hours a week. It's shift work, which can take a toll, but it's a union job and we're treated very well. It's low stress in a sense where if you can pass the monthly exams demonstrating your knowledge of nuclear plant operations, you shouldn't be concerned. But if you're not as book smart as the rest of the crew, you can have some problems passing the initial training you receive and the continuing. So, moral of the story, if you can pass the training, it's very low stress. I'm a truck driver, home every day. Just listen to music and watch the sunrise. Make about $80K. Could make much more if I put in the hours. The worst is having people complain about you existing. Just gotta have a screw 'em mentality. I wouldn't recommend truck driving to others though. It's very hard to get a good paying job. I got very lucky and had a home daily company hire me the moment I got my commercial driver's license. Long haul drivers actually make less than home daily drivers, which nobody seems to understand. Deckhand on a tugboat in New York for $385 a day. Next promotion to mate for $580 a day, and captain is $670 a day. We live in the boat and go up and down the East Coast for 2 weeks. Then we get 2 weeks off work. Most of the time we eat free food and watch satellite TV. I bring my Xbox and play a couple hours every day using my phone as a hotspot. Literally straight chilling for 2 weeks with friends. I guess my job is not low stress or high paying to most people, but it checks both boxes for me as a single 24-year-old male. I work rural EMS in Canada. My schedule is 96 hours on, followed by 96 hours off. In other words, I work 4 straight days and then get 4 days off. I live in a big city, but the town I work in is an hour and 40 minutes away. So my commute is not that terrible when you consider that I only need to make the drive once every 4 days. When I am actually at work, I can do whatever I want as long as we don't get a call. My company sets us up with a nice staff house, satellite TV, Wi-Fi, and a decent gym. I spend my days playing video games with my coworkers, there's 4 of us on a shift, watching TV or movies, cooking, eating, working out, taking a nap, and just hanging out with my coworkers. If we do get a call, we have 8 minutes to respond, so I can lounge around in pajamas all day if I want, and if I need to run an errand in town, I can usually get it done without getting more than 8 minutes away from the station. The calls can be kind of crappy, lots of highway accidents and farming accidents, but I find the really crappy ones are few and far between. Most of the calls are just driving people who don't feel well to the hospital, but I do enjoy the tough calls because they challenge me to make quick decisions and use my skills. In 96 hours, we usually average about 5 to 6 calls. However, I've literally worked 96 hours without a single call on more than one occasion. Regardless, I never take the work home with me. I make around $70,000 per year with good benefits, and there are a lot of opportunities to pick up extra shifts, which are paid at double time. In-house graphic designer for a pretty large retail company. We stay busy, but there isn't any of the stress that comes from working at an agency and having to please several different clients or worrying about getting enough work as a freelancer. I ultrasound hearts and vascular systems in a doctor's office for $35 an hour. Super laid back. If you're fast enough, half your time is free time. I manage to trade stocks, read, learn something new, and just generally keep extra time filled with something interesting. I teach English in China, 12 hours a week, roughly $2,700 US a month, and that's with almost all living expenses paid. 1 return flight a year, 3 months off a year, but I'm paid for 11 months. I know I'll never get rich, but I make way more than I could spend considering the cost of living here. I could easily save $2,000 US a month. I have plenty of time to pursue my hobbies, and even my time in the office is very relaxed as my classics are so basic. I work quality control on electrical and mechanical projects. It's simple. Read the original proposal and the 100% specifications, and don't let the subcontractors waver from them. Keep the customer happy by showing them you're all about giving them what they paid for. It has its moments where it can get pretty hectic, but 90% of the time, it's laid back and stress-free. I am noticing that quality assurance seems to be one of the main jobs on this post. I sit behind a desk and design do-it-yourself home theater and automation systems. People send in their floor plans and I put little speaker and TV images where they should install stuff. And I troubleshoot the systems over the phone too. Easiest money I've ever made. And I get paid pretty good. I'm a personal assistant for a really high-end real estate agent. First few months was stressful, constantly trying to work out how he operates. But now that I've worked it out, I get everything done in advance for him and spend most of my day just chatting with others in the office, drinking coffee, and going on Reddit. I despise working. I've always hated it. I thought I would grow out of it, but at 27, I just seem to dislike it even more. So to find a job I can be excellent at with minimum effort and stress that pays me well is a dream. I also start early and don't take lunch, so I'm home in good time to my doggo. I'm a college professor. If you find a field you love, you get to talk about your favorite thing for 15 hours a week, earn the income of a full-time job, and get several months off a year. Air quotes because you use that time for grading and prepping stuff for the next semester. And of course, you work longer than 15 hours a week. But what that work consists of varies widely. If community college, it's pretty chill, mostly meetings and waiting for students to see you. Research positions vary in responsibilities. Specialized schools could be chill or more demanding, but there's potential for the majority of your time outside the classroom to be up to you and how you spend it. I'm a senior accountant for an oil and gas company. It's kind of a small family-operated company. The president of the company takes very good care of the employees and their families in terms of compensation, bonuses, and benefits. Unlike other larger oil and gas companies that have been hit hard in recent years, this one is still very much in the black. Make no mistake, the actual work is very busy and fast-paced. My career has advanced pretty fast here, going from knowing nothing about oil and gas industry to being one of the 3 most senior accountants here in just a few short years. Always something new to learn and skills to advance. Really, it's not just the career role itself that makes it low stress, but the place you work as well. The respect the company and people here have for each other is a rare find. Everyone loves their job, and the company is always pushing and making good on the ideal that employees are their biggest asset. Both people above and below me are highly talented, respectful, and very easy to work with. I have to work a weekend every once in a while from home just to be sure my duties are done to the best of my ability. However, for the most part, I go in at 8 a.m. and leave at 5 p.m. and my job ends there. Very flexible, can work from home or leave early, and the trust that everyone's busting their butt is a big part of that. It's my dream job. After years of crappy ones inside and outside the field after graduating college, I got really lucky. A friend of mine makes $45,000 a year in marketing. His entire job is making a newspaper/TV/internet ad saying, "Who would like to try a new product?" Sitting on his butt for several days waiting. Then when people respond, he sorts them by if they should qualify or not. Guys can't test women's deodorant and things like that. That's the end of his job. Everything else is done by another group. He has hours of paid free time he uses to code and do side projects. He went to school for 8 years for math to get this job. I work data analytics. Today, I make $75K plus salary, good benefits, working Monday to Friday, 7 to 3:30, and all from home. Haven't worked a weekend or night or more than 40 hours in years. No commute, no traffic, no office drama, no dress code. No degree, no special training. Just an eye for patterns and fascination with data. Started my career 13 years ago doing outbound telemarketing for a credit card company. Nights and weekends for around $9 an hour. Basically the first job I could find with health insurance. About once a year, I looked for something that was a little bit of a stretch and moved for a raise. Mastered the job and move again. Going to school now for a degree only because my work will pay for it. I work as a landman in the oil and gas industry. While that title is sort of all-inclusive and covers a ton of different jobs, I spend most of my time researching the history of property to see who's owned it for the past 150 years and what they've done with it. Things like are there any mortgages, oil and gas leases, easements, etc. Oil and gas companies want this information so they can determine who to lease/pay when they drill for oil. All of this information is available in county courthouses, so I spend about half my time there reading old documents. The rest of the time, I'm able to work from home. It's a very chill job. I don't really have a boss, no one bothers me when I'm working, and courthouses can be almost like libraries sometimes. It's also a very rewarding job because you're sort of figuring out a puzzle and get to see something through to completion before moving on to your next project. There are sometimes deadlines and priorities, but they're never too bad for me, and I always hit them. It can also get stressful when there's no work or you have to move around, but I still think it's worth it. Generally, most people have a degree, but not always. It's very much an industry that still relies heavily on networking, and I know several people who do what I do and make great money without a degree. I've made over $100K a year for about 5 years now, and I've only been doing it for 7. I'm a petroleum geologist, 6-figure salary right out of school for a 40-hour-a-week job. It still involves some stress because of how much money rides on my educated guesses, but for the most part, us geologists love what we do and don't stress a whole lot. Just so you know, low stress doesn't always equate to low effort. Anyway, my official job title is senior producer, but it should probably be wearer of many hats. In a given day, I write, shoot, edit, and produce between 7 and 12 unique videos, along with all the associated assets, splash screens, and tie-in media. Said videos are then published to a handful of sites, after which I prepare and disseminate just over a dozen newsletters. Once that part's finished, I do back-end maintenance on a few of the pages in question, followed by some light community management. If I'm lucky, I'll get 15 minutes to rush out, grab lunch, and make my way back to the studio, after which I'll devote myself to editing the stories that our writers put together. That's followed by a focus on whatever one-off projects might be in the pipeline, which usually includes a fair amount of asset creation or adjustment, and a final look at the documentation associated with any of the above endeavors, which I'll update as necessary. When I finally leave at the end of the day, I'm exhausted. It's a lot of work, but I'm happy with the fact that I have creative control, and I'm pleased to be making something with an immediately visible end result. And most of all, I'm not bored. For me at least, there's nothing more stressful than boredom. I'm a carman. I inspect and repair freight cars. Most of the time, work is laid back and easy. Sometimes I have to work in crappy conditions like a heat wave or torrential rain or freezing temperatures. Sometimes I have to lift heavy stuff or do sustained hard labor, but those days are rare. Stress only comes when the yard is all messed up and the yardmaster wants us to magically unmess it, or when managers come snooping around to try and get you in trouble. Again, rare days. The job suits me and pays me enough to be comfortable. My schedule sucks, but they're hiring, so I'll finally have some seniority. I work for one of the world's largest board game companies. Most of my job is granting studios in other countries access to our files so they can translate them and sell them in their country's retailers and then pay us a royalty. I get to go on trips to check out their studios to make sure they're up to the job, go to a lot of game conventions, and literally am required to play games with the coworkers I love at least a couple times a week. The benefits are great, and being only 2 years out of college, the work experience and salary are good. I got my master's, and luckily enough, a friend of a friend just then needed someone who could do data analysis. So I moved to a small city in a poor state where most men graduate high school with little literacy or numeracy and end up going to work on farms or doing manual labor. I spend on average about 4 hours a day doing pretty basic calculations in Excel and get paid twice the average income for this town. It has its pros and cons. I meet tons of interesting people I wouldn't have otherwise come across, and I have a very different perspective now on what I used to consider success. But it's also lonely, and I have a hard time relating my life to those people I meet. I work midnights as a direct support professional for people with developmental disabilities. 90% of the time I'm on Reddit or drawing or watching movies. Most of the time the guys in the group home are sleeping. It doesn't pay anything amazing, but $10.25 plus benefits isn't all bad when all I have is a GED and a few hours of training. Some people couldn't do it. Too nervous around people who are definitely not neurotypical. One of the guys right now a few feet away is just rapidly rocking in a recliner as he watches TV and occasionally making noises, which I just realized would freak a lot of people out. My full job title is Export Compliance Executive at a medical device company. Sounds fancy, but in reality, a distributor asks for a document which has already been compiled by someone else. I just copy and paste. It's fantastic. I'm a program coordinator for desk operations at a large university. Essentially, I manage all of the desks in the dorms on campus. This entails lots of student employees whom I relate quite well with at my ripe old age of 22. The job is mainly email chains and meetings with an occasional difficult conversation. I get university benefits and just under $40K. To be fair, my cost of living is dirt cheap. I'm a dog walker in Los Angeles. I see the same 10 dogs every day, every week. So it's like I have 10 dogs of my own. Since my clients are dogs, they're always happy to see me, which I will never take for granted after years and years in retail. I get to be outside in the sunshine, listen to lots of podcasts, and I'm walking all day. I'm no Rockefeller, but I work part-time and it pays the bills and gives me a little extra money to play with. So I'm very grateful. I don't know if it's a good salary, but I take home about $30 an hour in tips dealing poker. My paychecks are usually $200 to $300 every other week, after benefits and taxes are paid for. You can take home over $5K a month just pitching cards to people and putting up with their whining. The job has completely worn me down after 12 years, but there's zero stress involved with it. Mine is way different than most of the other comments on here, but I make upwards of $120 a day just delivering pizza for Domino's in an incredibly affluent area of North Texas. Basically, getting paid to drive around and smoke. It's amazing. I'm an independent contract courier. My job is to drive to a list of animal hospitals, pick up blood samples, urine, stool, biopsies, etc., and then transport them to a medical laboratory for testing. I make $240 a day, just driving around in my car. I'm a medical transcriptionist. I think the pay is very good considering how stress-free and easy the job is, once you learn the lingo properly. I work in 3 shifts too, so the pay is even better. I'm self-employed, but I guess it still counts. I help small to mid-sized companies grow their business online, both strategically and operatively. The requirement is that they've already had a decent revenue stream and profit. Then, my recipe is very simple. Revamp their website, build content like blog posts and landing pages to get more organic traffic, plus buying ads, if the data shows it's profitable. The demand is so high that I've set up 4 rules. 1, there shall be no demand that I'm physically present. 2, clients shall not tell me how many hours I need to work. They should be happy for the hours I allocate for them. 3, there shall be no deadlines. 4, I only take projects that I find fun. I can work from wherever I want, whenever I want, as long as I have some electricity and an internet connection. My clients are happy because I bring in good results that cover what they pay me. Some of my clients have internal statements saying we put our employees' well-being before business. So I never have to feel bad if I take a day off to do something I like. They rather encourage me to do it. I could easily work 300%, but I choose to work half-time. At this point, I should hire more people, and I probably will, but I enjoy my freedom a bit too much still. I recently got my job and I'm really lucky. I work for a university in admin and get about $60K a year and 17 super to respond to emails and the occasional phone call from students who need help. Sometimes it can be tricky issues, but a lot of the time I basically tell them stuff that can be found on our website, like their study dates. Or I explain how to submit forms and send their forms off to be processed. I love my job. I work in digital media marketing. I make okay money, around $80K, and work from home. Some days I'll have about 1 to 2 hours worth of work to do, but probably 2 to 3 days a week I do almost nothing. Sometimes I feel bad for how little I work compared to the credit I get, but a large part of my job is reactionary. So I figure as long as I'm there when I'm needed, then I'm earning my wage. I've also been doing this for 6 years, so I can do it with my eyes closed. I get no joy from it, but it's so easy and I work from home. So, meh. I work in swimming pool repair. I get paid by the job, not by the hour. So if I want to mess around all day, I do. If I want to make a buttload of money, I bust my butt all day. I get to make my own hours, I quote my own prices, and I knock off early for a matinee or for a beer with friends whenever I want. I average about $75K a year. I work in software quality assurance. Pays about the same as developers, unless you're on top tiers or specialized, but way less stressful. Also, the hardcore programming autistics don't enter this field since it's not actual coding, so competition for good jobs is less. Most just run or write tests and tell nerds they're doing things wrong. I'm a teacher for students who don't give a crap because their parents are rich. It's often frustrating that they don't want to learn, but then again, pretty easygoing because you can reuse old teaching plans without feeling guilty. Parents, students, and administration only get upset when I'm fed up and expect at least some of them to do their work. Currently, my contract rolls in desktop support. I'm not sure if I'm just lucky or great at my job, but nothing breaks and I only really spend 10 minutes a day total fixing things. This email won't send, that's because the email address is incorrect, that sort of stuff. I'm more here for a just-in-case scenario. It's okay, but I miss my previous roles on a service desk being hit with calls for 8 hours a day. I get in, blink, and it's time to go home because it's so full on. The days go pretty slow here and I end up exhausting Reddit by lunchtime. But for $35 an hour at 21 years old, I can't complain. I'm a garbage man. I switch between a two-man truck and the scale house at the transfer section. I make $50K a year to dump your trash and tell you where to dump your trash. It's a town job. We're one of maybe 6 towns in Connecticut that hasn't privatized trash collection.
Men of Reddit, we all hear the horror stories about how crazy men can be when they get rejected. But what have been your crazy experiences when you reject a woman? I dated a girl for a couple of weeks, and on the third date, we chilled at my place and talked. She told me that she thought men who watched spicy content were disgusting, and if you were in a relationship, it was cheating. 10 minutes later, she, out of nowhere, asked to use my computer. I knew the last thing that I had open was not going to impress her, so I said maybe some other time. She got way too angry after hearing that, and said that her intention was to write me an email about how much she liked me. I call BS. When I said I thought it would be best if we called it a night, and I drove her home, she went quiet until about halfway there, when she then says, "My dad's best friend is a cop, and I can say what I want." I got the gist, but I figured it was an attempt to make me reconsider. I dropped her off, and she started crying very loudly, fell down in her parents' driveway, and crawled to the front door. Sure enough, next day I was arrested for SA, and it took a week for her to admit that she made it all up. But the charges weren't dropped for another 7 months. Dude, you should press charges and talk to a lawyer. She shouldn't get away with that. I agree, for 2 reasons. 1, every time someone makes a false SA claim, it hurts the victims who have actually been through it. And 2, I think laws should be put in place to punish those who falsely report crimes such as SA. I rejected a girl once, then about 2 or 3 months later, I was catfished by her. She was, in her words, only proving that I would end up going out with her anyways, by pretending to be somebody completely different. A police report and a restraining order later, she's out of my life. I bet she's still watching you. Beware. Wait, you were able to get a restraining order? Did she show up at your place or something? From what I've heard, it's not easy to get a restraining order. I knew someone who had to call the police on their ex several times before they gave the ex an injunction. Yeah, I'm actually shocked this person got a restraining order so easily. I've heard horror stories of women not being able to get them for their crazy male counterparts. To be fair, I was totally into this girl at first, so my rejection might have stung a little more. We were friends with benefits, and she was legitimately super attractive to me. Just as time went on, I learned more and more about her, and that made me not want to be with her. Hooking up with her, sure, but not like building a life together. So when she made the move to be more than friends with benefits, and I said no, she told me she was gonna hook up with a dude she knew I hated, film it, and send it to me. They're married now, with kids, so I mean, good on them, I guess. Dude, she's playing the long game. She's probably recorded the marriage, the birth of her kids, and will film getting old and gray with the new guy, and only then send you the final edit on her deathbed. That'll teach him. Went on one very low-key date that she asked me on, and let her know as gently as possible that I wasn't feeling it. This chick pulled all sorts of crap after that. Showing up at random places where I was, pretending it was a coincidence, calls from different numbers, making fake social media accounts to not only try to contact me, but also befriend my friends, made a lot of self-harm threats, made up friends and relatives dying, posting photos of me unaware she was nearby, made up boyfriends to try to elicit jealousy, even a fake pregnancy scare from one of said fake boyfriends. Really didn't understand how she thought this was going to sway my opinion. This sort of crap went on for a while until I moved away for unrelated reasons. This was many years ago now, and I can't even remember her name. I hope she's forgotten mine as well. Another woman pulled the "I'm pregnant" card on me after we broke up. Positive test in hand and everything. Drove her to a clinic for a professional test. She wasn't, of course, but what a sick freaking tactic. Yeah, I think it needs to be known how often women use the pregnancy tactic to try and control men, to the point where they will sleep with another man to get pregnant to try and keep the man that they just cheated on. It's wild. She tried to come over to my house and scream at me from the outside. Little did she know my mom doesn't freaking play that crap, and went outside and yelled at her 20 times worse than she ever thought. As a full-grown adult, I had an ex come to my parents' house. While I was there, she had found out on Facebook because I was tagged in some posts, and I guess wanted to talk to me after I had told her that I didn't want to be with her anymore. I had blocked her number and her Facebook after a few attempts to reach me over the last 3 weeks. She showed up to my parents' place and I was helping my dad take out the trash. My mom saw her from the garage and started speed walking towards her car saying, No, get that damn car in reverse, honey. She got to her driver's side window and just started yelling that she should be ashamed to show her face around here, and to have some damn self-respect. I didn't even get towards the car before my ex started backing out. Never tried contacting me again. Thanks, Mom. You're the best. Real talk. What's with that speed walking things mom do? Because it's so goddamn terrifying when it's coming for you. When it's pointed at somebody else, it's the funniest looking way to move you've ever seen. But the second you're the target, it's more serious than a late period. And it doesn't matter if it's your mom or not. That's what I don't get. You hear any dad but your own yell and you immediately think, that's not my dad, I'm not in trouble. They could be looking right at you and yelling your name, but you're still not gonna get worried. But if that mom walk starts targeting you, doesn't matter if you've never seen this woman in your life before or not. You start mentally listing all the crap you've done recently that could get you in trouble. I can't speak on the mom walk, but the mom stare is definitely real. My friend once lied to his mom that I got caught smoking at school, which is something I still haven't done to this day, but she straightened her back, stared daggers into my soul and just said, "You did what?" I panicked and was trying to say something while my friend was just busting out laughing. She slashed my tires when I was at work. My buddies tried to tell me to stay away because she was nutso. I decided to form my own opinion. Conclusion, she was nutso. Does after a breakup count? If so, I was graduating from my master's. I had low self-esteem and my ex was really hinting that she wanted to get married. I didn't. I was super clear on that. She broke it off right before I was about to visit my parents for about a week. I was a bit bummed on my way home and a couple of days after that. Then she called me and said that she wanted to talk when I got back. By then, I had a feeling that she would want to get back together if we got engaged or married. That's exactly what happened. When I get back, she started acting like everything was fine and talked about us getting serious. After that, I sat her down and told her that it was over. I was pissed and she was in the harmful mindset. She even ran to the kitchen and got a knife and threatened to, well, you know. I pulled the knife away from her while getting cut myself and locked her in the bathroom where there was nothing sharp. And I called a friend of mine to give us a ride so I can leave her at her house. At that point, I didn't want to leave her at a cab or act crazy or go missing or something. That's not the end of it either. It had just begun. The next morning, I woke up to 30 texts and 5 missed calls, which I decided to ignore. It escalated to 40 a day and 20 missed calls for about a week. Then notes in my car. Then a friend of hers started coming to my house to talk to me and say what went wrong and apologize for her. I told her that I was not going to get back with her. When that didn't happen, she sent over 2 of her friends to beat me up. Luckily, my friends were in my apartment and they backed off. The next morning, I had 2 slashed tires on my car. Almost missed a job interview. She would stalk me by staying at the cafe across the street from my place for hours, monitoring who came in and who came out and at what time. The final straw was after about 3 months had passed, I started dating a girl and we went to my apartment to DVD and chill. I got a call about an hour in. It was a friend of mine saying that he got a call from my ex saying that the girl with the brown hair and red blouse, exactly my new girlfriend's description, was too ugly for me and she wanted to mess her up. I ended up making my new girlfriend a nice dinner and had a bottle of wine, so I could stall for enough time for my ex to finally leave her post at the cafe. I ended up changing my car, apartment, cell phone, emails, and after that, I haven't heard from her since. Man, that beat up situation sounds hilarious. I just imagine 2 guys knocking on your door, trying to be all tough and threatening you when you answer it. Then you slowly open the door and you have a bunch of friends just over watching the game. Yeah, I don't know what she expected out of that. But yeah, I opened the door and 2 guys were standing there and asked, "Are you OP?" I, of course, said yes, and the guys just started pushing and saying that I broke my ex's heart and that I should be in pain as well. Well, I started with the punches, buddies heard me and they came out, with tons of beer bottles in hand. They started to run away after a friend of mine threw one of the bottles at the floor near their feet. My bet is they saw one too many telenovelas. Kind of related, but a friend of mine stalked a boy in her class for almost 2 years and would always tell people, faculty included, how she wanted to marry him and have his kids and keep him in her basement, etc. It was mostly joking, but her crush on him was real. Anyways, one of the teachers ratted her out and she got hit with the threat of a restraining order by the OP if he wanted to press charges. She was mortified, but luckily he didn't want to pursue anything with the law. After that, she cooled down with the stalking. A year went by and she said that she was over him, but then decided to solicit him for a hookup via Instagram DMs, and then told everyone about how she did so. She was reported by the faculty member yet again. When are people going to realize that DMs don't stay private anymore? Then again, why did this chick go around telling everybody she did it? So a little backstory, I was in high school and found out this girl was cheating on me, so I broke up with her. She wanted to get back together, but I wasn't going to fall into that again. She texted me like once a month trying to start a conversation to get back together. I kept it to small talk for about 5 minutes each time before killing the conversation. Every time I rejected her, she would get absolutely pissed. She would badmouth me around the school, she tried convincing my friends that I was gay, she tried saying that I beat her, and the list would go on and on. Oh, and she tried convincing me that she was pregnant. She would make comments like, "You're gonna be a dad." So I went to her house on a Saturday and told her that I will pay for a test, but she got really pissed and started making excuses. Luckily, nobody ever believed her, and I graduated now, so I don't have to deal with her. She still tries to get back with me through text every now and then. There was this girl that used to hang out with most of my friends and came at me with aroused fury. The worst event happened when we were all at my house getting wasted. At first, she was just being flirtatious, but the more she drank, the louder and more obnoxious her advances became, to the point where she was just repeating, "OP, let me get a taste of that popsicle stick." My strategy was to laugh and brush it off, hoping not to agitate whatever primal instincts were fueling that flame in her loins. Eventually, she got up from the couch, gave me this sort of determined look, and said something like, "I'm just gonna taste it." Then she started to rush over to me, when she slipped and straight face planted on the hardwood floor. The floor itself had a crawl space underneath, so the sound reverberated like a bag of bricks just being dropped. While everyone was pointing and laughing, I went and hid in my room, and for the next hour or so, I could hear her wandering around looking for me, yelling and saying weird stuff. Eventually she left, and from what I've seen on her Facebook, it looks like she quit getting wasted and is doing way better today. No more popsicle zombies. That might have been hot if she wasn't wasted. I dated this girl in high school and she was really clingy, so I broke up with her. I came home the next day to find out that she had been calling my house every 5 minutes and hanging up. She wouldn't stop calling, even after I picked up and asked her not to do it anymore. We had to call the police. I ran into her dad a few days later, and he apologized for her bad behavior. Years later, she moved in with a friend of mine and screwed him out of a ton of money. Apparently, he was giving her money for rent and bills. However, she didn't use it for any of that. She moved out of their apartment, and when my friend got home one night, found out that he was being evicted and his girlfriend was gone. Had a girlfriend holding a knife against my chest when I tried to break up with her. Needless to say, we ended up doing the tango, and I broke up with her another day, by phone, because I wouldn't go nowhere near her with bad news. And people wonder why guys decide to break up with women over the phone or via text. Situations like this is why. Mine is pretty tame in comparison to others, but chick wanted me to ask her out to homecoming, but I had been dating my girlfriend for about 2 years, so I was obviously going to take her. She didn't like that because apparently I was in love with her just because I was nice to her and had conversations with her during English class. Anyway, she asked me and I say no. I tell her that I was going to go with my girlfriend, but she was more than welcome to come hang out with us and we would even dance with her. She got pissed and stormed off. 15 minutes later, I'm smacked in the side of the head with a plate of French fries covered in ketchup. She then proceeded to get some kid to go to the office and say that she threw them because I spit in her face. I almost got expelled because she was in tears and really selling it. Thankfully, the snack bar attendant saw everything and intervened before anything happened. She didn't get in trouble or anything, the school just acted like it was over and done with. She moved to Alaska or something after that. We really need to start punishing people for lying about stuff and trying to get other people in trouble. I was relatively good looking and popular in high school and was aware that girls liked me. One of those girls was someone I was studying with for an AP exam. She lived a couple of blocks away and would come over when I got home from baseball practice. One night we were quizzing each other and she said something to the extent of, "If you get all of them right, I'll let you kiss me." I didn't get them all right, but she told me that I could kiss her anyways. I just kind of chuckled and told her, "Nope, I have to get them all right," and we went back to studying. Later that night, she sent me an email about how she views me as more than a friend and wants to know if I felt the same way. She was a cool girl and I liked hanging out with her, but I didn't want to date her. So I told her how I valued our friendship, etc. I get that it's a cliche response, but rather than accepting it gracefully, she told our AP US history teacher I was harassing her. This history teacher was also my baseball coach. Now, if you watch American teen movies, but you didn't play sports, you probably think that my teacher/coach told me that we would speak about it later. Then we would have a good laugh about it in the locker room. If you actually played sports, you're probably aware that I was benched for the next game and spent the next couple of practices running laps around the perimeter of the field. I guess it's not really a horror story per se, but it's still a crappy thing to do because a guy turned you down. We were friends and hooked up a couple of times. I told her I didn't want to hook up with her anymore because I was interested in somebody else. We talked on and off for a bit, but never really hung out because of our history, and I didn't feel comfortable with seeing her in person, except strictly platonically. Then one day she texted me saying that she was SA'd and that she needed someone to talk to. I call her to see if she was okay, and she was bawling her eyes out on the phone. I made an exception about not seeing her in person this time. When I was with her, she ran to me and cried in my arms for a little bit, then slowly started reaching into my pants. I told her I wasn't into that, and she went off. She started screaming about how I could reject her in her time of need, that she just needed somebody to care about her, love her, to hold her, and to touch her, etc. The real kicker though, somewhere in her rambling, she said that she completely lied about the whole thing. I dropped her off a block away from her house, told her to get the hell out of my car, and just ghosted her after that. Like I've said in this video already, we really need to get some strict laws about people lying about serious things. This is about my sister-in-law's best friend. I couldn't stand being around her. She was obnoxious, stupid, and dressed like a $10 lady of the night. My brother and sister-in-law were always planning date nights for the four of us, and then they would find a way to recede into the night so that the two of us would be alone. I was nice at first, but then her flirting went into overdrive. She was always smiling at me, caressing me, and laughing at my jokes even though I wasn't trying to be funny. I had to put the brakes on everything and become short with my answers and practically sat on my hands. I wanted to make sure I wasn't sending any signals out. After several get-togethers, she finally got the hint. Unfortunately, she couldn't handle the rejection and started bad-mouthing me to everyone with the listening ear. I was confronted several times by my family members and mutual friends about how mean I was to her. I was even told that she told someone I didn't even know that I got wasted and started grabbing her. She couldn't handle rejection like a grown-up, so she made me out to be the jerk. I was dating a girl, she was about 20 and I was about 22 at the time, and things were clearly not working out. And the only thing that kept me from ending things was that I had left my favorite John Mayer hoodie at her place and couldn't figure out how to get it back without a whole bunch of awkwardness. I decided that there was no way around it, so I called her to tell her that it wasn't working out and that we needed to end things, and that I'm coming over to get my sweatshirt, but she could leave it on her porch if she didn't want to talk to me or see me. No luck there. I pull up to her house and she is standing in her front yard. My hoodie is laying behind her in the grass. I get out of my car and before I can say anything, she starts yelling at me. I should mention that it was a nice mid-June evening and many of her neighbors in this idyllic picture of suburbia were sitting on their porches and got to witness all of this. This goes on for about 13 minutes non-stop with her going on and on while I say nothing. Finally, she runs out of things to yell, and she is finally catching her breath. So I ask, "Can I have my hoodie back?" She throws it at me, and I bolt for the car and out of the driveway before she can start up again. The best part? My hoodie was unharmed. I'm not gonna lie, when I first read this story, I laughed when they said John Mayer hoodie. I guess his girlfriend's body wasn't a Wonderland. I figured why not end the video with a personal story. I don't know if this would be considered a rejection officially, but I did date a girl for 5 years that handled the breakup pretty terribly. Like I stated, we dated for over 5 years, and I can honestly say that it should have ended 2.5 years earlier. But hey, when you're a young guy, you think more with your little head more than your big one. Well, fast forward to me finally getting the courage to break up with her. If you need to know the final straw, she kept talking to me about some work trip she was going on and how it was going to change her. And I knew what that meant. She was going to do a bunch of things that I would hate or disagree with. Once I did this, I felt a sigh of relief, but also like a dummy, I jumped right into another relationship because I thought that was a smart thing to do at the time. Well, one day, my idiot self sent a text to my ex that was meant for my new girlfriend, who my ex had no idea existed. She thought I was still single. Well, the month that followed had my ex calling my mom, telling her that she was pregnant, which made my family freak out on me. Don't worry, the baby wasn't mine, and if I remember correctly, she didn't even have a baby for another 2 years, so that was a lie. She also called my mom while my new girlfriend was at my house to inform me that she was at a crisis center because she was thinking about ending it all. Oh, and of course, since Facebook was all the rage at the time, she found my new girlfriend and decided to talk to her. That was on top of other things like she would tell me that she downed a whole bottle of Everclear, falling asleep in a bathtub full of water, and about how she destroyed her brand new car that I made a couple of payments on. Basically, she was trying to do everything she could to ruin my new relationship. I also believe she randomly showed up at my house once or twice. So it's safe to say she didn't handle things well, but to be fair, my new relationship wasn't going to last that long either anyways, because I found out that my new lady was hiding 2 kids from me and lying about them being hers.
Redditors who work in retail, what's the saddest thing someone ever returned? Customers come in regularly with large amounts of baby supply returns. They get the wrong gender items or duplicates. An older woman came in with a cartload, so I asked about the new baby. She slowly and through tears explained that her only child and grandbaby had died during childbirth. A man returned a Christmas tree one year. He was pretty bummed out, and when I asked him about it, he told me that he was supposed to have visitation this Christmas, but his ex refused to let him see his kids. I still think about that guy. I hope he gets his kids this year. I used to be a manager for the Disney store. We had a regular old man come in with his wife regularly. Super cute couple. I mean, matching outfits, holding hands, just as cute as could be. We used to sell these huge stuffed animals, like ginormous. The couple came in about once a week and would just walk around, laugh, and smile, buy little things here and there. One night, he came in on his own and bought one of these gigantic Mickeys we had. It was $300, I think. He was so excited about it. He told us all about how he was going to take her out to dinner and it would be sitting there on the bed to surprise her when they got home. Anyway, 2 days later, he walked back in carrying the giant Mickey Mouse plush to return it. He had bought it to be a surprise for her 75th birthday. She had passed away in her sleep the day before her birthday. He thanked us and said goodbye and that he would not be coming back because our store reminded him too much of his wife. We found out he passed away a week later. We found out all the details because one of our employees went to their same church. 2 middle-aged ladies, apparently sisters, were having the time of their life in my department. One bought a ton of assorted housewares, including some relatively inexpensive but very distinctive-looking glass vases. We chatted throughout, and they were fun. I kept thinking about how much of a real joy it had been to deal with them. The next week, she came back to return the vases. When I asked the reason for the return, suspecting, the color/size didn't work like I expected, she embarrassedly explained that impulsive purchases were a problem in her manic states. Not a return, but I worked in a jewelry store and the saddest sale we ever had was a lay-by. Guy had this ring on lay-by for 12 months, but died in a car accident. His parents came in and picked up the ring so his girlfriend could keep it. Don't think she had any idea he was going to propose. I worked at Toys R Us in the late 90s, before there was really a separate baby store, and we sold all the cribs and clothing and such. Someone returned carts full of baby items from a registry. An older man came in on behalf of the mother because the baby was stillborn. We accepted all items at full price with no receipts and gave cash back. The family certainly didn't need hundreds of dollars in store credit. I work at a liquor store in a college town, and one night some younger guy was returning a keg barrel, only it was still half full. I jokingly asked the guy if it was a crappy party or something along those lines, and he responded with, "Yeah, it was a party for one of our friends who died the day of the party." I work at a hardware store. About a week ago, we had someone return a jack, which I think had failed and snapped shut on his arm. His forearm was completely shattered, and I think he lost his job. I work at a thrift store, and it's not exactly returning, but we get a lot of sad donations. For example, we had a recording of a father's final moments he made for his 2 sons. It's like 2 hours long. I listened to the whole thing. Also, there's a guy who comes in every week and donates 1 box of stuff. I asked him if he was moving one time, and he said, "No, these were my wife's, and she's passed now." I'm never asking someone why they're donating again. I was working at a large pet store in the tropical fish department. One busy weekend, a very well-dressed, rather snobby woman came in and bought 6 baby angelfish, each about the size of a dime, plus the fins. The store I worked in was inside a huge high-end shopping mall, so we had a holding service where we would bag up fish, cash the customer out, and float the fish in their bags in a warm tank until the customer had finished all their shopping and was ready to leave for home. As a matter of course, I offered to hold this lady's baby angelfish. She said she was all good and laughed. We thought nothing of it, since many of our customers come in from outside the mall just to stop at the pet store, and didn't bother visiting the rest of the mall. 4 or 5 hours later, she stormed back into the store demanding a manager and a refund. She was shaking the bag in our faces for emphasis, yelling that her gorgeous angels were all dead. On close inspection, we discovered that the silly woman had put the poor fish in her car, presumably so she didn't need to carry them while she stopped for other things or returned to the store to pick them up. Unfortunately, because it was January and the temperature outside was about minus 15 degrees Celsius, the tiny babies had frozen to death. She simply couldn't wrap her head around the idea that tropical fish cannot withstand freezing temperatures. Even when we took a tiny fish out of the bag and showed her that not only had ice formed on top of the once 84-degree Fahrenheit water, but the dime-sized fish was actually frozen stiff. Some people just shouldn't have pets. Not strictly retail or a return, but at the cinema I used to work for, someone booked an entire gold class lounge so they could propose to their girlfriend alone. This cost thousands of dollars. He had a special video made up to play after the trailers, the whole 9 yards. A day or two before the big day, he called to cancel his booking. His girlfriend had dumped him. I work in a clothing store, and a gentleman came in with his wife because he had lost 80 pounds and needed new clothes because his old ones wouldn't fit, obviously. I congratulated and jested that he must be working out every day to lose that kind of weight. He replied that cancer was the cause of the weight loss and not exercise as I so jointly suggested. He understood when I apologized and still bought clothes. Jared Allen bought like 15 families Christmas at the Target I worked for. I mean, like big ticket stuff for everyone, like TV, iPad, things like that. It was something like $15K total. The next day, since I was the security manager, I was screamed at by 8 of those families that wanted to do returns for cash, saying I was ruining their children's Christmas. I made it to my lunch break before I comped out. This kid came in by himself and was looking for some socks or booties for his weenie dog. He was telling me about how he got her and how now her legs didn't work anymore, so he didn't want her getting hurt while dragging. He paid with a bunch of pocket change and ran out the door. A couple days later, he came back in and just handed me the socks back. I worked at a Subway for a year, and we shared the building with a jewelry store. It was a small business, and we always made a salad for the owners free of charge. One day, a customer at their store is incredibly enthusiastic about buying an engagement ring for their significant other. He told the entire Subway crew about how he met her after his mother died and that they've been seeing each other for almost 5 years. He kept saying how happy he was that he found someone who makes him truly happy, and that all the challenges in his life were necessary for him to find true love. He came back a few days later. The light from his eyes was gone. He was returning the ring. I talked to the owners later that day after he left, and apparently she broke it off with him because she fell in love with someone else. It was really sad to watch. I worked at a grocery store where someone returned a box of crackers. She said that she doesn't actually eat the crackers. She just licks the flavoring off them. This particular box didn't have enough seasoning for her, so she had licked the crackers and then brought them back. I went behind the return counter one day and saw a pair of boots with a damage slip in it. They looked fine, so I asked my coworker why she damaged them out of the system, and she said a girl died in them. Apparently, the girl's mother bought them for her when she was sick in the hospital. She died and the mother returned them. Someone returned a prescription dog food. I knew what had happened as soon as she approached the counter. Her dog passed away. He was very old and sick. She broke down in front of me. I used to work for an online retailer that sold baby items. Think baby memory books, clothing, toys, growth charts, things like that. Someone was returning a baby memory box where you can store items like their baby shoes and teeth for posterity. When I asked what was the reason for the return, she said it was because they had lost the baby. You could tell in her voice how hard that was to say. I was fresh out of college, childless, and had no idea how to react. Fortunately, that was the only time I ran into that during my time there. A set of Mr. and Mrs. pillows. She had a tan line where her engagement ring was, a black eye, and her neck in a brace. It turns out the fiancé was abusive, but he didn't show his true colors until about a month before the wedding when he thought he had her trapped. Luckily, she got out. I felt really bad for her. Not so much a return, but an old man came into the photo lab I worked at to pick up his photos. He had dropped them off months ago and he had no ticket. Turns out his house burned down and he lost everything. We helped him find the photos. All he had were photos of a gray cat sleeping or sitting by a window. He cried like a baby when he saw the photos. He was old and living alone. The only thing he cared about was that cat, and it had died in the fire. I forgot to charge him for the photos. My bad. I helped a woman 7 months pregnant and her husband pick out a whole baby set for their new baby. Stroller, crib, car seats, clothes, and everything. The stroller was a high-end model that we didn't sell many of, so it stood out to me. A month later, I saw the same stroller, car seat, and crib in the return bin. When I asked about it, my manager said that the woman and her husband were hit by a drunk driver and killed. Her mother returned the items. This happened a little over a year ago. A frail old woman came in to return an unopened box of a very expensive brand of cologne. She didn't say much past, "I need to return this." And me, being the people person I am, tried to jokingly mention, did her husband not like the brand? She sighed and said, it was his birthday present, and when I went to visit him in the hospice to give it to him, he had already passed away. I was speechless and profusely apologized and ended up talking to her about my mom passing away a few months prior to this. And we ended up crying together in the store and talking for an hour and a half. She left with a smile on her face, but the initial reaction still haunts my dreams. Not my story, but my supervisor shared a story with me about an old woman who placed a large order to redecorate her and her husband's house. We're a store that mostly sells general home items, but also have a large selection of furniture. She had selected several $1,000s worth of merchandise. A lot of it was special order, so it was being sold non-returnable. The woman ended up passing away shortly after everything was delivered, and the husband couldn't deal with all the new stuff. He wanted to keep all of their old things exactly the way they were, so my supervisor made an exception to have it all returned and refunded. Somewhat similarly, someone created a registry for their upcoming baby. They had a ton of baby stuff picked out. Unfortunately, the husband had later called in to say his wife had miscarried and the baby didn't make it. The wife was okay, but in no condition to talk on the phone. So again, my supervisor allowed everything to be returned. No questions asked. I worked at a vitamin store. The most commonly bought items were weight loss or control pills that had ephedra in them. Xenadrine and the store brand equivalent were the most popular of those, next to Hydroxycut. Our store sent memos that due to recent problems with the products, we would be honoring full refunds even if the product was opened and mostly used. The people returning them were tweaked to their follicles, shaking, sputtering, saying, I can't take this stuff anymore. It's making my heart pound too fast. And I'm just like, okay, it's okay. I should add that not only was it the most popular product bought, but most commonly returned one. The return box in the back was brimmed to the top with open bottles of Xenadrine. A woman came up to the return desk with 3 shopping carts and a fistful of long receipts. She explained that she was a compulsive shopper, and that as part of her therapy, she was supposed to return everything to face how much she had been spending. It took me over an hour to ring up the hundreds of items she had, all new in box, all with receipts. When all of it was done, the bill came up to nearly $800, and a lot of the things had been bought long enough ago that they had clearances out, so her return was pennies on the dollar. Back when I had just started college, I worked at Barnes & Noble. One night, I was working a shift at the cash register, and a lady came up with a handful of books and a stuffed llama. I told her the llama was really cute, and she was like, I know, isn't it great? She checked out and walked out to her car, where her husband and son were waiting. 5 minutes later, she came back inside. She said she had to return the llama, and I expressed surprise and asked why. She said, my husband wants my son to have a more American animal, like a lion. I worked in a plus-size clothing store. I helped a woman pick out a wardrobe for a 2-week cruise that she was going on with her boyfriend of 6 months. A few weeks later, she returned all the clothes unworn. I asked her if the cruise was canceled. No, it turns out that there never was a cruise or a relationship. This guy was dating her as a prank, and he and his buddies schemed to see what they could get the girl to believe. She thought he was in love with her and wanted to move in together soon. His parting words to her were, "Like anyone would really date a fat person like you." A woman came into the pet store I worked night shifts at and bought a ton of stuff for her new rat, and about 2 days later, she returned everything, including the rat. She put him in a soda box turned on the short end. He was coated in feces and urine. I took him in the back and cleaned him up, but God, I don't know if I've ever felt so bad for an animal that I really have never taken an interest to. I worked at a clothing store that was popular with teens. A spoiled tween came to the register accompanied by her mom and laid out easily $500 worth of clothing, probably around 20 plus tops, 5 pairs of jeans, a jacket, shorts, sandals, and more. As I'm ringing up this absurd amount of items, another girl, I assume the first girl's friend, joins the tween and her mom. As she approaches, I realize the friend must have recently underwent chemo. She was probably a tween as well, completely bald and frail. She approaches the girl and her mom with a single tank top. Friend, is it okay if I get this? Mom, sure, but Susan needs to put back one of her items. Daughter, no way, Mom. Profanity-laden verbal assault on her mother ensues. Mom decides to purchase $500 of clothes for the daughter, while the cancer-stricken friend returns the $10 tank top. I continue despondently ringing everything up, hating the world. I used to manage the warehouse at an electronics store, and occasionally sold stuff and did returns and whatnot. A younger guy came in, about 19 or 20, and said he just got his first real job and wanted to buy a big screen TV to celebrate his first paycheck. Sold him a good TV, did the normal testing for him, slight discount on warranty and whatnot, cause I'm cool like that. He was super happy. I packed everything up for him and helped him get it out to his hatchback, probably his parents' vehicle. A week later, I saw the TV in my warehouse with a return tag on it. I asked around a bit, but nobody really knew until our usual customer service girl came in to start our shift. What I was told was that after I sold the TV, he was on his way home when a deer jumped out in front of the car, went through the windshield, and killed him instantly. The TV was undamaged because he'd laid it down on the floor in the back all wrapped up in bubble wrap in the box. His dad had come in to return it. I work in customer relations for a luxury car dealership. I basically get paid to interact with customers and make them feel more at ease during the buying and servicing of their vehicle. That being said, I get to know and like a lot of our customers. So one day last year around Halloween, we had a young family come in looking for an SUV, since the wife was pregnant and the husband had just gotten a huge promotion. They had a kid already that was around 4 if I remember correctly, and were actually just really cool people. I actually spent a lot of time getting to know them through their buying process and was excited to have this family get their dream car. Fast forward to this August and I see their SUV out in the parking lot. When you work at a dealership, you learn your favorite plates and cars. Or I'm a freak, both are possible. I ask around and no one in service is working with them. So I ask our sales manager, thinking they're switching into the redesigned model of the SUV. We'd talked about it when they'd originally bought their car. He gave me an uneasy look and said it was the wife's mom, and I should talk to the sales guy. Weird, but okay. I find the sales guy and he's also uneasy, but after a few minutes tells me to go to the back office and he'll fill me in. Apparently, the husband had some kind of massive breakdown and had taken it out on himself and his wife. She had just had the baby and I suppose that had stressed him out. Her mom was called when the toddler went to a neighbor and said his parents were messy and still sleeping. Basically, the mom was there to see if we could buy the vehicle back after getting everything else taken care of, which we did. For my story, I'm on the other side of the coin here. Last fall, my dad decided to finally get his hearing checked and assessed for hearing aids. He really needed them. He wanted to be able to hear his first grandbaby, my daughter, coo and babble when she was born in January. Unfortunately, the ones that worked the best for him were outside the budget he and my mom could afford. My husband and I decided Santa would gift them to him. He cried. His new ears gave him a new lease on life. He was happy, chatty, and interactive during family get-togethers because he could actually hear bother everyone else enough to participate. Fast forward to January, and he's the happiest, most doting of grandpas. He was the first person to hold her, after my husband. Dad started feeling sick in February. He died on April 12, 2016. The baby was just 10 weeks old. My mom has been largely unable to handle things in the wake of his death. Among all of the other things that I've handled for my family, because it's just too hard on everyone else, Mom asked if I would do something with his ears. I ended up calling the hearing aid shop and asking if they knew of any donation program where someone could benefit from the use of his ears. We actually ended up donating them to an elderly woman who was having difficulty communicating with her family and couldn't afford new ears of her own. Dad would have liked that. I'd like to think that she can hear her grandbabies giggle and laugh now. I've declined the opportunity to meet her. I don't think my heart could take it. For my story, they didn't actually return anything, but we offered to return something. I work at a pet store and we do dog training. This guy got a pit bull and signed him up for one of our training packages that includes Adult Level 1, Adult Level 2, and a Good Citizen test. He finished Adult 1 and everything was great. He registered for his Level 2 class and when the day came, didn't show up. This was out of character for him, but the trainer gave him the benefit of the doubt, and since he was the only dog in the class, didn't think much of it. Turns out the 21-year-old kid had lost his life earlier that morning while his dog was around. We found out from an online news thing. Girlfriend figured something was weird when he didn't meet up with her after his training class time was over. Even though it was past the return time and he bought the package, we offered to return the unused class to the family. The girlfriend didn't want to because the owner would have wanted the dog to be trained, especially being a pit bull. One time, I helped a woman pick out some items for her elderly sick dog who had incontinence problems. He had been sick for a while, but she seemed optimistic. That morning, before she took him to the vet, he was doing much better than he had for the last few weeks. He was energetic and mobile. While I was checking her out at the register, she got a call from the vet. I stood there and watched her face crumble as the doctor told her that he had had a seizure on the exam table, and that there was nothing they could do for him. All I could do was step out of my register box and hold her while she sobbed. I'm not sure when this happened, but I want to say around 2007-2008. I worked at Hollywood Video, Blockbuster competition, as a regular hourly employee. One evening, a woman came in with a few children's movies about 3 months late. Instead of dropping the movies in the DVD drive-thru box or the walk-up return box, she came directly into the store. Visibly shaken and on the verge of tears, she apologizes for the movies being late and explains that her son had just died and that she'd forgotten to return them. My coworker and I were so floored that we offered her several free rentals, a popcorn/candy/soda pack, and a few additional credits on her account. It was definitely one of those rare times that I didn't feel like my time was a total waste at an entry-level post-high school job. A friend of mine currently works at a pretty high-end clothing store. About a couple weeks ago, he helped this girl pick out a new dress for grandma's upcoming birthday party. A couple of weeks later, she came back and exchanged the dress for a black one so she could wear it to the same grandma's upcoming funeral. I work in a pet store. We rarely get dead animal returns besides fish, but it does happen. My flaw is I get attached to some of the animals in my care, mostly if they don't sell right away and are very handleable. I'm fine when they eventually get sold. Better than living in a pet store anyways. But the worst experience was when I sold a guinea pig who was extremely sociable and loving to a nice-looking family. A few days later, they come in and I recognize them, and they're holding a small box in their hands. Their son had thrown it against the wall in a temper tantrum. Knowing I had a hand in the death of one of my favorites by selling him wrecked me for a week.
People who quit their jobs in a blaze of glory. What's your story? I used to work recording concerts for a school conservatory. Basically, students would pay a fee for the conservatory to record their concerts and put them on CD for them. I had the job as a work study since I was a freshman, and I loved it. In the second half of my senior year, I received a call from my boss saying that I messed up on a CD and that I needed to meet with him in the studio to fix it at 4 p.m. I thought it was an odd request. Mistakes sometimes happen, but all of the employees knew how to fix them themselves, and I was the most experienced worker that they had at that point. I asked if I could just fix it earlier and submit it to the office assistant, but he insisted I come in at 4. I showed up about 15 minutes before 4 to figure out what had gone wrong. I put the CD in and immediately could hear that it was a CD of a completely different concert. That was really bizarre, but we have backups of all the audio, so I just burned another CD of the correct concert from that. As the CD was burning, my boss came in and told me that I was fired. He told me screwing up a CD that badly was unacceptable. I had never been fired before. This was the longest job I had ever had, and I was totally blindsided. To this day, I have no idea how the wrong concert ended up on that CD. The best I could figure is that the office assistant mixed up the CDs or something. But whoever's fault it was, it had a really easy problem to fix. I argued with him for a bit by telling him that I thought he was making a big mistake, and this really wasn't a huge deal. But he refused to listen. Just when I resigned myself to my fate, the newly burned CD popped out of the computer. We both looked at it for 5 seconds in silence. Then I laughed, handed it to him, and shook his hand and then walked out the door. I wasn't done though. I loved that job and I felt wronged. I was also saving up for a trip to Europe and I didn't want to have to cancel it. I had already had my tickets to Wacken. Without a job or a girlfriend, I had a lot of time on my hands that semester. So I decided I would just start my own business recording students' concerts using my own equipment. I charged slightly lower fees than my former employer and put ads online and around the conservatory. I advertised that I was more experienced than anyone working at the conservatory audio, and frankly, my equipment was better as long as they weren't playing one of the big venues, especially for jazz shows. Also, instead of burning CDs, I offered my clients to just send them the audio digitally, which a lot of students preferred because they would just get it within an hour or so after the concert had ended rather than several days later. College kids are cheap, and it didn't take long before I had to hire my own assistant to keep up with all the concerts that we were recording. I probably ended up cutting the conservatory's audio department business by 20%. My former boss was livid, and he made a couple of unsuccessful attempts to shut us down. I had earned more money that semester than I probably had in my previous 3.5 years combined of working for someone else. I was just mad at myself for not doing this earlier. The only problem is, I don't feel comfortable putting that job on my resume anymore. I know that feeling. I can't use my last job as a reference either, but I'll be telling my story later on in this video. Not me, but my dad. He was a partner in a software company and they were undergoing a merger. There was a ton of confusion in the move, and one guy was trying to take advantage of the situation. He was from the other company. He fired my dad for no reason. However, my dad was really well liked at his company. So much so that many of the employees from his company walked out of the building when he left with his stuff. One guy apparently came running down to the parking lot because he realized the guy that fired my dad did not have the authority to do so. My dad put his things in the car, goes back upstairs, fires the guy who tried to fire him, and then quits. I don't know if this is a blaze of glory, but it made me feel good. I got a job in a big city. My new manager said that she wanted to give me a 2-week trial period because she just wasn't sure about me. This manager was a total B, constantly yelling, expecting us to work through lunch, work late, and come in early. Had sessions in her office about how awful we were. I was miserable and the job was hell. The Friday of the end of my trial period, my manager called me into her office. She said that she was pleasantly surprised at how good I was and that she definitely wanted to keep me on. I told her that unfortunately she had not passed my trial period and I would not be staying. When I walked out, it was the best elevator ride down to the lobby ever. People often forget that employment is a two-way street. It's always refreshing to remind them of that. When that boss said there was a trial period, my brain was like, I would have told her she's on my trial period too. Glad the OP did that in the end. I drove for about 4 hours for a job interview that was right out of grad school. Nice place, working environment seemed a little tense, but that's alright. This was an animal shelter in the Midwest. The owner asked me to clean a cage for him. I said sure, doctors have to clean out cages every once in a while. It takes about 10 seconds. Then he asked me to hang out for a second while he talked to a client. I said sure. He told me to just keep cleaning the cages. I thought he was kidding. A technician walked into the room and asked me why the cages weren't done. I shrugged. From her attitude, I gathered that he wasn't kidding about the cages. After a wait in excess of 20 minutes, I just left. Got a phone call about 5 minutes later. I didn't answer it. Wait, he was making you clean cages during a job interview? What? There are so many things wrong with that. Free labor? What a turd move. Probably just didn't want to do it themselves. It's also illegal. I was a server in a really crappy restaurant. It was owned by a husband and wife. The wife was truly in charge and responsible for actually getting almost everything done. The husband was a hot-headed jerk who would show up from time to time to kick the cook out of the kitchen to play chef himself. He was a terrible cook. His wife did her best to just keep him out of the restaurant altogether, But he was a jerk and he did as he pleased. Luckily, he was also lazy, and restauranting is work, so he wasn't there often. Anyways, one day on a slow morning, when I was the only server, he came in to cook breakfast and was just ruining everything. He was smoking a cigar in the kitchen, using way too much grease and just burning everything. Customers would order scrambled eggs and bacon. How hard is that? And he would give me a blackened mystery substance dripping with grease to bring to their table. I refused. He screamed at me within earshot of the customers and told me that he was the restaurateur, not me, so I better do as I was told. So I took that crap food to the tables. They complained and asked me to replace it while looking at me like they couldn't believe that I would bring such food to their table in the first place. I brought it back to the kitchen and Hothead couldn't believe that they didn't want it. He doesn't believe me and yells at me some more. I am not about to bring the same food out to that table, so I refuse and tell him to do it himself. As you can imagine, he did not like that very much and he let me know very loudly. But he did take the food out to them. They gave him the same response they gave me, and he shouted at them. He shouted a whole rant at them about how they had no idea what food was, and that he grew up in Greece where food was an art. And he went to school and owned a restaurant, so what credentials could they have? Who are they to question food? He told them this restaurant was only for people who truly appreciated food and that they could go eat elsewhere. They did leave in silence. I think they were too shocked at what had just happened to come up with a rebuttal. When he came back from his incident with them, he told me that I was on thin ice and he didn't care for the backtalk I had given him. He said if I didn't like how he runs things, I should just leave. I was the only server in that place, and I was so pissed off I couldn't see straight. And he had just told me to leave if I didn't like how he operated. Well, I didn't like how he operated, so I left. He must have not realized that there were no other servers, because I immediately got a voicemail about how it was all a misunderstanding and I should come back because they were busy. How they were busy, I don't know, and everything would be all right. Luckily, I was working 2 jobs at the time, so I had the option to just pick up more hours at my other job. I didn't answer his calls until hours later when the voicemail started sounding really desperate. All I said was I can't talk because I was working my other job and I'm not coming back, so stop calling. I heard from ex-coworkers that his wife came in shortly thereafter, cried uncontrollably and closed the place down for the rest of the day. That did make me feel bad because she was a nice lady who worked really hard, and I can only imagine how hard it was to try and run a restaurant with a husband like that. If that man is like that in public, I would hate to see how he is in private. I feel bad for that wife. I was an investigative reporter in Cleveland and had turned in a solid story about State Senator Kevin McLaughlin using his campaign finance money to buy Ohio State game tickets and hotel rooms for his mistress. It was approved by the editor and publisher, but the CEO, Matt Haggerty, spiked it when Coughlin threatened a lawsuit. I told him to go screw himself on the conference call with his people, before security escorted me out of the building. I sent the spiked story to everyone in my Rolodex. It circulated the State House, and a couple of weeks later, Coughlin dropped out of the race for governor. I sued the paper and Coughlin for wrongful termination. Coughlin agreed that he never had grounds for a lawsuit, and I settled with the company. Slate and a few other publications wrote about my graceful exit. 10 out of 10 would tell him to screw himself again. This is the reason why we need journalists. They tend to get a bad rap, but who else watches the watchers? One of my first jobs was part-time at some small budget supermarket. The boss was a wanker of severely limited intelligence, assigning me far more shifts than I agreed to and spending the entire day shouting at everybody, rather than doing actual work. Turns out I was also getting €1 less per than agreed upon. I noticed that after a month when I finally got my first paycheck. Not cool. Grounds enough for me to terminate my work contract with immediate effect. So I got myself a new job, typed out my notice, put it in my coat pocket, and waited for the worst possible moment to quit. The moment came 2 weeks later. My boss and I were opening on a Saturday, and it just so happened that the cashier that was supposed to come in an hour later called in sick. He tells me and goes off on a tirade about how the shift is going to be hell with just the 2 of us. I smile, hand him my notice, and stroll out of the store without saying a word. Best feeling ever. Was working as a busser at Outback in college, animation major. Was there roughly 6 months. Never called out, always came in when asked to. Finals were coming up, and I was slightly behind on my final project. Called the manager 3 days in advance. I needed a day off I was scheduled for. Told me I had to get it covered. No problem. I called all the other bidders and even 2 hostesses. No one could or would do it. Called the boss back. His response, and I quote, "You need to decide right now what's more important, school or your career." I exploded on the guy with the easiest decision I've ever made in my life. I never understood the school versus career comment. Are people stupid enough to think people just go to college for fun and are not trying to get a better career? Not a blaze, more like a slow burn. Used to be a Comcast tech, put in my 2 weeks notice and got as many parking tickets as I could. The tickets couldn't be pegged to me because I don't own the vehicle. Comcast has a policy that employees need to pay their own parking tickets, but by the time Comcast got the tickets in the mail, I wouldn't have been an employee anymore. And you know the phenomenon where work vehicles can park wherever they want and not get a ticket? That doesn't apply to vehicles that say Comcast on the side. I still imagine the curses made in my name after they uncovered the extent of my evil plot. Wasn't me, but I was a department supervisor at a Best Buy for a while back in the early 2000s. We had 10 rows of various software. The store manager always had this one employee rearrange the planogram each week. It sucked. The dude had enough. He farted into the overhead intercom, shouted, "Eat my junk!" and shoulder blocked the software rack to the ground. Knowing I was going to have to clean it up, I was never more pissed at a person. Looking back, never more impressed. Bumped into him last year at the same Best Buy. He smiled and said, "Looks like they stopped selling software." I'm not gonna lie, the farting into the overhead comm got me. I worked at a technical support call center for almost a decade. The average burnout time or turnover was in 6 months. I was sitting in a meeting. They were ragging on us for sending out too many boxes. The week previously, we were sitting in the exact same room being ragged on for not sending enough boxes. I had a rough year, and I was just sitting there dying inside. I had this sudden epiphany. Every day since I walked into the door of that place was worse than the last. There was literally no reason for me to be there. That thought had just popped into my head like a light bulb went off. I got up in the middle of the meeting and just walked out without a word. The SDM that was giving the meeting just had their mouth hung open. He wasn't used to the drones doing things like this. He started after me and I ignored him. I went back to my desk and gathered up some things, gave a few other things to some people, and gave a goodbye email. The whole time the SDM was getting more and more agitated trying to talk to me, eventually yelling. I just ignored him like a bad smell at a dinner party. So I just went home. They called and called for days. Eventually, a supervisor that had me on Facebook messaged me. He was an okay dude, and I told him flatly that I was not returning. He said that we had a lot of paperwork to do and an exit interview and so on. I said no, I wasn't going back on that floor. I wasn't going to sit in an office like a bad teenager in the principal's office. It was over, I was done. We finally agreed to meet downstairs in an empty cubicle. I flatly didn't agree to anything, didn't sign anything, and just gathered whatever stuff they had for me and I left. For near a decade, they dictated everything in my life. My sleep schedule, my family life, holidays. They went so far as to time the seconds of how long I was in the bathroom during the day. That was all over. They had no more control over me, and I enjoyed making that clear. A call center is the worst job I've ever had. And I worked as a plumber one summer. Why not end this video with a personal story? Because I made sure that the people at my old job would remember me quitting. So first, I have to give you a little backstory. I worked at my old job for 8 years. It was a full-time gig at an automotive plant where we did a lot of testing on different vehicle parts. It was a place with a lot of lifers. They like to complain about how young people didn't want to work anymore because the job also had a lot of turnover. But if you were like me, someone who could be counted on, came in on their days off, and actually did their job well, you had a lot of freedom at the company. Well, after I learned how the politics of the whole company worked, I quickly became known as the guy that would speak up about problems in the workplace. A lot of those lifers would just say that I was complaining and I didn't want to do the job. Well, I didn't hear those same people complaining when I pointed out that the whole company wasn't paying overtime correctly for the last 2 years, and magically, everyone just got crazy overtime checks to fix the mistake. I guess I'm just lazy though. The job was mostly boring and I often dreaded going to work. But I stayed at the job so long because it was easy, the pay was good, and I just started taking my laptop to work to edit my YouTube videos. Since I was counted on so much during my shift, I was given a lead position and I worked directly with supervisors to make sure we took care of all the necessary problems. Well, after some drama in the workplace, we had a new shift manager that oversaw all 3 shifts, who was also a lifer. We will call them Billy Bob, and I have to say, dude was pretty cool until he wasn't. You see, one day, I was going to go on vacation and I noticed that there wasn't going to be a lead operator in charge while I was gone. So I said to Billy Bob, "Yo, I have scheduled vacation next week and there isn't a lead for the shift scheduled. So you're gonna have to figure that out." There was no aggression or sinister tone behind those words or anything. But I do remember him giving me this weird look, which I thought was odd because I was just letting my boss know that there was something that needed to be solved or there might be problems later. I should also mention that I was taking this vacation to burn my personal days because I was on the verge of quitting that job. I for many years wanted to make the leap into content creation full time, and I felt like the job was holding me back. Plus, my job also had this dumb rule of, if you don't use it, you lose it, when it came to vacation time, so I wasn't going to give them free days after working all those years. Well, when I returned from my vacation, I had officially made up my mind that I was going to put in my 2 weeks, and I told this to my shift lead, and he was like, "Are you serious? Because that saves me from having to have a talk with you." I was like, "For what?" "Well, apparently you pissed off Billy Bob before you left by saying he needs to figure something out. And he went straight to HR and tried to find some dirt on you. Then he went and pulled all of your time cards and said that he found some issues. So now you have a meeting scheduled on Monday with HR, him, and other management." Are you serious? That's petty as hell. But you know what? Tell them I'm down for the meeting. I can't wait. By the way, those issues they found were that I wasn't working full-time hours because this was during COVID and they cut our hours down to 32 hours a week and specifically said that people could leave if it was slow and we had coverage. So I left a lot with my boss's approval. Anyways, what I need to let you guys and gals know is I can be really cool to work with. As long as you do your job and you don't make my job harder, we will be best friends. But the moment you try to screw me over, I will become your worst enemy. When you have worked at a place for 8 years with a bunch of dudes that like to gossip more than a high school cheerleading squad, you get a lot of dirt on people that you work with, and I had a lot of dirt on this shift manager. So when word got around that I was quitting and that I was happily waiting for this HR meeting because I had a few things to bring up, well, after that was known, the HR meeting magically disappeared. "Well, he's quitting in 2 weeks anyways, so why even bother meeting with him?" Now, I don't know about y'all, but if I had an employee that was abusing their time cards, I wouldn't want them to stick around at the company any longer than they needed to be. But hey, that's just me. So since I didn't get a chance to get my revenge, I decided why not make the day I quit memorable. So over the next few days, I hatched a plan to make sure that I left my mark on this job that I had spent almost a decade at. First off, with TikTok being all the rage, I decided to make a video that I would upload the day I quit. Secondly, I wanted to leave something behind that would have people be reminded of me when I'm long gone. So I made some stupid meme stickers that I hid all around the campus of my work. Each sticker had me doing some kind of dumb expression. For example, I made this stupid one that said, "This clock needs new batteries, or you just learned that time moves slower here," which was obviously hid behind a time clock that I stared at for years. Another one said, "Hey, stop peeing back here." And I hid that outside because we once had a problem where workers were pissing on company property instead of in the bathrooms. But my favorite of the 5 stickers that I made said this: "What are you doing down here? Looking for a raise?" And I stuck it right under my shift manager's desk. Lastly, I planned not to finish out my 2 weeks. Our pay period ended on Saturday and I decided, you know what? I think I'll leave on Saturday instead of working another week. So on my final day, I texted my shift lead and my shift manager that today was going to be my last day, and I made sure to use the words, "You don't have a lead for tomorrow, so you're gonna have to figure that out." And I just left my job. Oh, and that TikTok that I mentioned, it was of me going around my whole workplace flipping off every camera that they had installed on campus. I even got in a golf cart and drove around the building to hit all the outside cameras. Last time I checked, that video had like 70,000 views on TikTok, and the day following my graceful exit from the company, I had a lot of people texting me that they saw it, and one particular manager wasn't happy, on top of needing to scramble to find some coverage when I decided to quit on the weekend. My friend also told me that upper management blocked anyone from seeing the cameras because they didn't want anyone knowing what I did on campus. Oh, and to my knowledge, only 3 of the 5 stickers I hid have been found 2 years later. All in all, I can say that I've never been happier since I quit that place.
Pawn shop owners, what was the best reaction you've seen from someone that tried to sell you something that was completely worthless? Having worked at a pawn shop before, I can say there are plenty of amazing stories of customers and their antics. Usually the best stories revolve around jewelry. This one woman came in with a big gold-colored ring and wanted to get a few $100s for it. Picking it up and looking at it, I could tell it was super fake, and I tried to explain that to her. She wouldn't buy it because the street vendor told me it was solid 14 karat. I went and picked up our huge earth magnet and put it near the ring, and it shot right to it. I explained that solid gold is not magnetic. She was stunned and couldn't believe that she had spent like $200 for it. I own a similar store. People still think their Beanie Babies have value. People also tend to think what items sell for online are what they'll sell for at the same price and speed locally. I worked in a pawn shop for a couple of years. The most memorable one was about 30 seconds. Large, sweaty man walks in with a belt sander, sets it down on the counter in front of me and plugs it right in. Made direct eye contact and switched it on. The sander immediately made a loud popping sound and smoke began to rise. Unplugged it, turned around and walked out without a single word between us. For a second, I thought he was just gonna walk in and sand the countertop. I worked in a small pawn shop for about 3 years, and my personal favorite was a greasy guy came in and dumped out a garbage bag of broken computer fans and a few assorted computer parts. We laughed for a few minutes and realized this guy was serious. My boss asked him how much he wanted for it all, and the guy said he didn't know how much it would be worth, but he heard there was gold in computer parts. We had to break it to the guy that the plastic computer fans had no gold in them, but we can check out the other parts. My boss gave him $5 for his trouble. 20 plus years of owning one, and I can spot fake gold without touching it. People never believe the chain they bought from the guy at the gas station for $50 isn't real. Never. Seeing people's reaction to this varies from they knew it to I'm gonna kill him! Not an owner, but I am a frequent shopper. I saw a meathead couple try and sell their off-brand wires-cut 20-inch car stereo speakers for $200. When the guy wouldn't bite, they flipped out, yelling, "You legally have to buy anything." They threw such a tantrum he called the cops. They got arrested. Car got searched, and wouldn't you know it, substances were found. Afterward, I got a good deal on some cordless power tools. I worked in one for a few years. Not really a best reaction, but a girl came in already in tears holding an engagement ring. Everyone at the pawn shop feels obliged to tell you why they're selling/pawning, and she told me she'd recently moved across the country and just found out that her fiance had married her friend back home. The big problem was I could tell it was fake as she was walking in the door. All I could tell her was, if you thought he was a jerk before you came in here, you're not gonna like what I'm about to tell you. Ended up giving her $5 for a worthless ring just to give her something. And she ended up a bit happier, cause now she had something new to hate him for and couldn't wait to tell him. My great uncle owns a pawn shop, and some of the crap there is hilarious or heartbreaking. People try to sell free old TVs they got on Craigslist for hundreds of dollars because now they're vintage, obviously rented instruments for their kids' band class that have tags on them from the rental place. And boy, do people get peeved about engagement rings. He literally has a bag of engagement rings. They're so easy to come by. Women tend to be sad when they find out they get almost nothing or that they're fake. Men tend to get aggressive. Enough that he is my cousin up front, watch out extra careful when he tells a dude he can't really pay much of anything for what the dude thought was an investment ring. And some of the excuses people make when stuff is obviously stolen are just horrible, especially if he asks if they can prove they're the owner of the item. On the other hand, if someone's trying to sell their wedding ring, especially if it's a lady with kids, he's been known to just give them $50 and send them on their way. My cousin who works with him has a stack of brochures for drug and alcohol treatment resources and stuff like that she gives out regularly. I have one here that's the opposite. Girls thought they had worthless cards that ended up being very worthwhile. I worked in a comic book shop that also sold trading cards. In this case, Magic the Gathering. Two young girls came in, maybe 14 and 15 years old, with a small box of cards. They said they found it in their uncle's closet that passed. They figured it wasn't worth much, but just wanted to see. I thought the same, and opened up the box of cards to take a quick glance, and I was a little alarmed at what I saw. Alpha and beta cards, cards, a couple of Power 9 cards, and this was just the first 10 cards in. I stopped, said, "I'm really sorry, but I'm not familiar with these older cards." I lied. I just wasn't authorized to try and buy something of this magnitude. I'll need to call the store owner. I called him, and at first he was annoyed because the other store he was visiting had a Ford plow through the front window. He just said not to bother with the trade-in, until I casually mentioned some of the cards there in the stack. He said, "Don't let those cards leave the building, I'm on my way," and hung up. The girls couldn't wait, and I asked if they wouldn't mind leaving the cards with me, along with their names and phone numbers, and we could get back to them. When the owner came in, he went to the back, got some gloves, and went through all the cards. I stayed after my shift because I wanted to see it unfold. The owner gained like 10,000 respect points from me when the girls and an older woman, presumably someone's mother, came back in, and he was straight with them. He said, "What you have here is all very worthwhile. There isn't a card in this box that would sell for less than about $5. But these cards here," he fanned out some cards that I couldn't see, "are the most valuable cards in the box. And this one," he pulled a card away, "would sell for the price of these and the entire box at least twice as much. I don't have enough money to be able to make you a fair offer. What you have here is easily worth about $20,000 to a collector." The girls' mouths dropped open. The owner offered them everything he had available in the shop, about $6,000, and they accepted. Not a pawn shop, but I used to work in a mobile electronics store. Alarms, cruise controls, stereos, things like that. Had a guy come in with a box full of outdated high-end stereo equipment. Head unit, EQ, preamp, 3 amplifiers, and some nice crossovers. I told him that most of it was worthless to me, but offered him $40 cash or $65 store credit. He flipped out and began a rant about how all his stuff cost over $2,000 when he bought it. Yeah, 16 years ago. I calmly explained that he may be able to get more for it on eBay or something, but I have to make a profit, so I can't offer much. I also explained I wouldn't have offered anything if I wasn't personally interested in the crossovers. He slammed everything back into the box and stomped out while calling us every name in the book. As he was walking out of the door, he looked back over his shoulder, yelled something, and flipped us off. This is where he messed up. Since he wasn't looking where he was stepping, he tripped over the curb and spilled the entire box of gear into a huge puddle. A very deep pothole full of rain. It was hard not to stick my head out of the door and bellow aloud, "Ha!" I was a pawnbroker for a while. So many junkies trying to sell fake jewelry. But this one lady really stood out. She came in with a chain and pendant in a cute little box. First thing we do is look for marking. While I was doing that, she started getting feisty, yelling at me saying, "Why are you doing that? Don't you see it says made in Italy? Hey, stop! Are you blind?" At this point, I'm like, "Okay, lady, we can't take this. It's not real gold." And she just flips out saying, "It doesn't matter, it's from Italy and this and that." She called me stupid and flipped off all the staff. All we did was laugh. But as she revved off, she hit a BMW and the owner saw her. We turned over the security taping to the cops. Screw that lady. I worked in a buy, sell, and trade video game store. Day after day, people would come in with common Atari stuff, PS2 Rock Band guitars and drum sets, throwaway original Xbox or PlayStation 1 games, Superman 64, yada yada yada. They'd be so happy and excited, and I had to be the one to break it to them that they weren't going to get hundreds of dollars for their crap. "But I spent $60 on it when it was new. We've taken really good care of it. We've never even used it. It's for the N64. Isn't that vintage? What do you mean a third-party Xbox controller isn't worth the trade-in price for a Microsoft brand one? They're the same thing." Day in and day out, I had a woman who threw a complete fit that we wouldn't take her Wii Rock Band drum set and 2 guitars. She also had 25 DVDs, an original Xbox and a Wii, neither of which could read discs, and about 30 bottom shelf games. All of the discs were scratched to oblivion, and everything reeked of cigarette smoke and was yellow. When I told her that the only things we could take were the 2 controllers that came with the Xbox, she yelled, threw the box of DVDs on the floor, and proceeded to rearrange games on our shelves as she stormed out. The man she was with just picked everything up and they left. They tried going to our second location, but we called them and let them know what happened. They got the same deal there and she threw the same fit. That's the problem with running a local video game store. Most people think they have a secret gold mine when they just have run-of-the-mill crap. I buy and repair typewriters. It's an odd niche hobby of mine more than anything. Typewriters can go for a lot of money, but most aren't honestly worth what people want. 85% of typewriters are worth no more than $125 in pristine condition. A lot of people will try to sell their inherited typewriters for $50 to $1,000 more than they're worth in some cases. I've seen one person try to sell a typewriter to me for $650 because he saw one online for $700 in a different color. I had bought the exact same typewriter 3 days before for $63. One typewriter, several people were all trying to sell them for $150 to $250. I bought one in amazing condition, better than the higher priced ones for $70. Just because someone labels a price or because it's old doesn't mean it's worth that price or value. That's not how it works. I had this old fellow try to sell me a tribal wooden African figure in a grass skirt. You know the type. When I told him it was worthless, he tried to convince me that the skirt was made out of real lion's mane. When I inevitably shot him down and called his bluff, he pulled a Bic lighter out of his pocket.
Do you want to buy this instead then?
I used to work at a pawn shop. One time, a guy came in with a DVD VCR combo, brand new in the box. We, the pawn shop employees, would always engage the customer in conversation while looking at the item, partly to feel out the customer and see if they had any inconsistencies in their story that may indicate stolen goods. So I started the conversation. Wow, this is a nice unit. Where'd you get it?
Best Buy. Just bought it a couple days ago.
Oh, nice. But you want to sell it to us? Why not just return it to Best Buy?
Oh, yeah. I can't find the receipt, but I bought it right down the street at the Best Buy, like 2 blocks from here.
While we talk, I'm pulling the unit out of the box and checking the cables and remote, looking on the bottom for a serial number. As I flip the bottom of the unit towards me, I see that it has a giant sticker on it that says, "Property of Rent-A-Center, do not buy or sell." I didn't say a word to him. My boss was watching over my shoulder. As soon as my boss saw the sticker, he pulled out a Polaroid camera, snapped the guy's picture, cussed him out, and practically threw the DVD VCR at the guy. I sent a fax to the other pawn shops in town to give them a heads up. I currently work at a pawn shop. People think silver is worth a lot more than it is. I get people thinking they'll get $400 for a chain that's maybe worth $30. Other than that, collectibles and memorabilia disappoints most people. I worked at Sam Ash for a long while. You can sell instruments there, not exactly a pawn shop, but the same concept. Guy walks in with 2 very nice, obviously handmade boutique basses. One is left-handed, one is right-handed. Obviously, a red flag that a novice wouldn't even think about.
Hey, I want to sell my basses.
Okay, any particular reason?
I don't play them anymore.
I see. Just couldn't decide if you were left or right-handed? He wants $700 for both. Looking at them, I figured they were $3 to $4K each. Problem was, they didn't have a name, just a logo. Lots of Googling later and we have a brand. Call the builder up and his warehouse was robbed weeks before. Police are called, guy's arrested, and builder gets his bases back. Not a pawn shop owner, but used to work at an art gallery that sold some local stuff. A guy brought in some rare prints by a local artist a couple towns over. These limited editions were super rare and valuable. He kept insisting. I stayed as polite as possible until I finally had to show him the exact same prints in the clearance bin at about 1/10 the price he was asking for. Not a pawn shop owner, but I went to buy a few tools from one. I was in line and in front of me was a tweaker that was having a meltdown after finding out her grandmother's ring wasn't really that valuable. It was gold plated and had a small fake diamond. The pawn shop owner offered her $5. She stood there trying to haggle for $7. He stood firm on his $5 and she continued to flip out. I told her I'd give her $10 just to get the heck out of my way. She grabbed her ring and told me to screw off and stormed out. Me and the shop owner had a good laugh, and he knocked off $5 for my inconvenience. Former private security and my partner used to work security for a pawn shop. A Navajo man once arrived at his place with a trailer full of landscaping equipment. It looked exactly like what you see residential landscaping companies use. Full of shovels, mowers, blowers, enough equipment for a 3 to 5 person crew. He wanted to sell everything at once, trailer included. The owner said, "Let's inventory everything. Give me 24 hours to add this up and I'll call you." The owner takes a notebook and writes everything down. Every item and what serial numbers he could get. get, writes down the plates on the trailer, and took a quick picture of a miscellaneous sticker on the hitch. He calls the police. The trailer was reported stolen that day. Him and a detective picked a time that was convenient. Owner calls the guy back and says, "I'll give you $4K for everything." And they argue over the phone, and he gives up and says he'll pay $7K for all the equipment. "Just come Tuesday at this time." The guy shows up, and one detective and 2 officers arrested him. The arrest was calm and without incident of any kind. The guy knew the jig was up. The actual value of the equipment? Like under 1K tops. It was heavily used, very old lawn equipment. I'm sure it worked great for whoever it was, but it was all super old equipment with little value. I worked in a pawn shop for 3 years in North Carolina. I had a couple of stoned/drunk guys come in on a Saturday just as I was trying to close. One staggered up to the counter and pulled a box out of a plastic grocery bag.
You're not gonna believe this, man. I have a collector's item worth $1,000.
He was correct, at least about the first part. He proceeded to sit a Galadriel doll from the Lord of the Rings movie on the counter. As usual, I pull up eBay to find many for sale in the $10 to $20 range. I turned the screen to show him and he flew into a rage. He jerked out his flip phone and dialed someone and proceeded to spit/scream into the phone.
Where did you see this doll for $1,000?
Then turns and spits and screams at me,
Go to Google! Go to Google!
I wasn't even mad. Okay, well, I guess it's time for my most embarrassing moment. I got scammed by one of those stereo vans that goes around with equipment saying they had extra, but really it's fake. I went to the bar and my hat got stolen. I really liked that hat, so I went to the store to buy another one. As I was walking in, this van pulls up and these 2 dudes are like, "Hey, wanna buy a stereo?" I'm like, "Nah, I'm cool." They were really persistent. It also just so happened that I had an extra $100 in my pocket. They kept pushing. Originally trying to sell it for like $400. They said it was their last stereo and I told them I only had 100. Honestly, I bought it because I not only wanted them to get out of my face, but I also thought it was a cool deal. Fast forward to me getting home and never opening the product. I swear to God, it sat in my living room for like 6 months. Finally, one day, I needed a little extra cash, and I'm like, why don't I just sell the speakers? I drive around to 4 different pawn shops who all tell me they couldn't take it. No explanation why. Finally, I have this Hispanic lady who barely speaks English at a pawn shop offer me $40. I kept haggling on the price, so finally she got her manager. When the manager came over, he Googled the product and turns out it's a known fake product that's sold all around. The guy thought I was trying to get one over on him. I explained myself and left before the cops got called. I was a little worried. It didn't hit me until later that night why I was getting such weird facial expressions from the other pawn shops I went to. I still cringe at that story. Worked at a GameStop near a Target. Target employee calls me and tells me a list of games that were just stolen from the store. Lo and behold, not 2 minutes later, a couple walks in to sell us the games. The funny part, they were still shrink wrapped with the Target price tag and the locked plastic outer device. I noticed a police car drive to the front of the Target, so I sent my coworker over to grab the cop and I expertly kept the attention of the 2 idiots. Engaged them in a bunch of small talk, and as the cop was about to walk in, I said, "Looks like someone's here to see you." Their faces were priceless. I worked at a shop for 12 years. One of the most common scenarios is when a relative ignorantly thinks or flat out lies about something they hand down. Guns are one of the most common. My grandpa took this off a Nazi in World War II. The rifle in question being a 1950s Mosin with Century Arms import marks from the 1980s. Tons of antique silverware from the 1800s that was made in the 1960s that is nickel silver, worth nothing at all. And countless medieval swords that were made in China that they want $500 for, that you can buy in a catalog for $29.99. Not an owner, but used to work in one owned by my dad's cousin. Some lady walked in and we examined her jewelry, which we determined was fake gold. So she walked away mad, and I guess she threw it in the trash can by the exit. Later that same day, we see a man walk in that seems to be just looking around. And after a few minutes, he goes to the counter and shares a story about how his grandmother passed away and left him some jewelry which was passed down through many generations. But the times were tough, so he wanted to pawn the jewelry temporarily until he'd be able to get some more money. So we tell him, sure, we can take a look at it, when he pulls out the exact same jewelry the lady had earlier that day. But not to anger him, we test it with a magnet just to show him that it isn't real gold. He then gets very angry, saying that it is real gold and that it's a 50-carat rare gold from the 1700s, and that's why it's magnetic. For anyone who knows about gold, 1. Real gold isn't magnetic. 2. The purest form of gold is 24 karat. We explain that to him, and he gets mad and pulls out a knife and starts trying to break our bulletproof glass with a cheap-looking knife, and as a result breaks it. After that, he just walks out, and we never saw him again. While closing up, we checked the trash can, and the jewelry the lady threw out was nowhere to be found. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, linked at the top of the description. And if you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot, linked in the description as well. Either way, thanks a lot for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.